Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, it's another Saturday. Here we are in, my gosh, another amazing week. As we speak, Mainers are picking their candidate, doing an incredible job of saying the party stands for something and it will not stand for some things. It's a miracle what they've done, really, to have a trusted process to replace someone after a primary, but they've done it. But I don't want to talk about Maine right now. Right now, I just want to talk about, I've been trying to understand how I feel about what's going on in the country. And in truth, I long for a president. And I suspect you do too. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, they weren't always popular. They certainly never wielded unitary executive authority, but they all tried to lead our big, complicated nation and faithfully execute the laws passed by Congress. Lyndon Johnson, Chester Arthur, Ulysses Grant, these were flawed men, made better by the awesome weight and responsibility of office. Sometimes selfish, sometimes conniving, sometimes corrupt. Our presidents have nevertheless inched us forward. Abraham Lincoln, while still fighting rebels who sought to destroy the nation rather than accept the self-evident truths of our founding, Lincoln taught us what a president is. At Gettysburg, he urged us to be dedicated to the unfinished work of assuring that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. That's the president's job. And for 250 years, presidents have done it. Well, the presidency still exists. The office of the presidency exists, but the office holder isn't doing the job. He is instead using the awesome powers invested in the office for some other purpose. America has no president. In place of the job that Lincoln described for us, the occupier of that revered office leads an aggressive effort to roll back civil rights, voting rights, even our freedom to choose what to read. He's ordered signs to be placed outside of the Smithsonian to denounce the very idea that American history is somehow about our dedication to the task of finishing that work. John Kennedy, when he was talking about going to the moon, that same speech, he talked about the perils of fast-moving technology. He knew that rapid technological change created new problems, even as it solved old ones. Yet when he urged that we should press ahead, it was, as he said, for the progress of all people. For the progress of all people, not for the enrichment of a few. And that's what a president does. And we don't have that now. Instead of feeling the weight and responsibility of leading our magnificent country, the man who redecorates the Oval Office with gold leaf sees only the tools of coercive power and the opportunities those tools create for his own personal enrichment. And enrich himself he has, in violation of, certainly in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. Look, a mob boss does that. A president, by constitutional definition, does not. We don't have a president. And look, Lincoln didn't simply tell us what the job of a president is. He also told us how to do it. He was, I don't know if you know this, he was the first president to be reelected in 32 years. That is an amazing thing. And in his first term, he successfully led us through a brutal civil war. Yet his second inaugural address, it's not about him or his accomplishments. He talks instead about all of us. He urges us to strive on to finish the work with firmness and yet with malice toward none. It's counsel he received from George Washington, who cautioned us about the dangers a big democracy like ours must guard against. Washington warned, This is a direct quote. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of others. This was in his farewell address. He said, "You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heart burnings which spring from these misrepresentations." Yet mocking individuals or disparaging our cities or lying about vote totals. Look, no one has done more to misrepresent one part of our nation to another than the man who now holds office but does not do the job of a president. The ever expanding targets of his malice are, next to himself, his favorite subject. This week, his lawyers admitted in court that he withheld more than $7 billion from states only because those states didn't vote for him. It is a declaration from the Oval Office that, at least for those of us who live in those states, the man at the resolute desk is not our leader, but our adversary. And I'm sorry, a president must be for all of us. I don't have to agree with him, but he has to be for all of us. If he is not, then he is not a president. Washington warned us about this, and Lincoln accepted war to prove the point. For 250 years, Americans have died for our freedoms. And at Gettysburg, Lincoln made clear that assuring that freedom was why our honored dead gave the last full measure of their devotion. But with this guy, this isn't why American soldiers are dying today. The man occupying the Oval Office has sent our men and our women to war in Venezuela for oil and for oil companies. And by the way, for a couple $1 billion that's unaccounted for. We don't know where it went. He took it. We don't know. And in Iran, he sent them to war to open a strait that's sending those troops closed. And then he said those soldiers supported him and died to prevent Iran from having a nuclear bomb. Ugh. Meanwhile, he's negotiating a path for the Saudis to build one. No soldier should die for this folly. A real president knows that every time a soldier makes that terrible sacrifice, it is to keep us free, not for any other reason. So I long for America to have a real president again, not a puffed up fake one, not a overpowered unitary executive, whatever the Supreme Court thinks that is, but a real president, one who understands what the job is and how to do it. All right, I got a great show for you today, and I'm squeezing in an extra guest here at the beginning, so stay tuned. All right, everybody, David is back. You may remember, he's the man who identified the canary in the coal mine of American democracy a few years ago with his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. And he's now the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in Ohio. And he and Amy Acton, the nominee for governor there, are running a hell of a campaign in a state many had given up on. David, thank you for taking the time to come back and talk to us about the race.
Of course. I'm really excited to join you again.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820. You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Ari Berman is Mother Jones' prize-winning national voting rights correspondent, an accomplished author whose books have helped all of us in America see what's happening to our franchise. Ari, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Edwin, good to talk to you again. Thank you.
So look, I meant to ask you this the first time we talked, and I didn't. You're one of the very best reporters covering voting rights in America. Did you get assigned to this beat and just excel at it? Or have you always been, attracted to the idea of covering American democracy?
I kind of stumbled on this voting rights beat by accident, to be totally honest with you. I've been covering the issue for 15 years, and I wrote my first story about it all the way back in August of 2011 called The GOP War on Voting for Rolling Stone, and it was definitely ahead of its time. You could probably reprint it in a different iteration today, but I noticed all of these states after the 2010 election when they flipped from blue to red, began passing new restrictions on voting. And this clearly seemed to me an attempt to try to nullify the election of the first Black president, Barack Obama. And I thought it was a big story. So I pitched it to Rolling Stone and wrote a long feature about it. But I thought I would really write one story about this subject, and then I would just go back to covering national politics. But obviously more stuff happened, and now it's really when you tell people you cover voting rights, everyone gets it, as opposed to back then people would be like, what are voting rights? And so the issue has really become more front and center, I think, both for good and bad these days.
Well, there are a lot of themes in that answer, including the role of race. I mean, is it fair to say at this point in American history that the attack on voting rights, on democracy, takes particular aim at Black and immigrant, and if you listen carefully, female voters?
I think so. I think it's about stopping the impact of the changing demographics of the country as the country becomes more diverse, as we head towards a majority-minority future in which the white majority will one day become a white minority. I think that there are people that feel threatened by those changes and want to preserve the status quo in any way possible. And so they're specifically targeting certain communities. Certainly that's been heightened by the fact that the Supreme Court has effectively destroyed the Voting Rights Act, which has led to new maps that specifically target the voting power of Black voters and other voters of color. So in some cases, it's implicit. In some cases, it's very explicit in terms of the targeting of the changing demographics of the country.
I heard somebody very smart yesterday say American autocracy looks a little different than the rest of the world because it is so tied to corporate money. Because the Supreme Court also changed our campaign finance rules to benefit corporations. Excuse me. Oh my God, a cough is a terrible thing on live radio. Do you see the impact of money and the impact of gerrymandering working together in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about trying to maintain the power of a small elite and trying to diminish the power of everyone else and trying to give billionaires more power over how elections are run and who wins elections, and giving everyday people less power in terms of their ability to influence the political system and their ability to determine who wins elections. And these things really run parallel to each other, both the Citizens United decision and then all the subsequent rulings by the Supreme Court that flooded the system with billionaire money, with dark money. That was happening at the same time that the Supreme Court was chipping away at the Voting Rights Act. So these are really parallel projects of the Supreme Court that I think work in tandem in terms of giving billionaires more influence and then giving the politicians who these billionaires support the power to disenfranchise voters of color, to make it harder to vote, to try to maintain the power of really what is now an elite white minority, elite conservative white minority, as opposed to upholding the will of the majority.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for all of you white folks who are listening, you aren't actually that elite. It's a handful of the billionaires who are appealing to some kind of, I don't know, racial solidarity to keep themselves in power. You're not getting much of the benefit of it.
No, I mean, it's really about concentrating power at the top. I think this is ultimately what this is about. I mean, if you look at Trump's presidency, I mean, really, he only cares about himself and his wealthy backers and his enriching his own family. I mean, it's never really been about benefiting everyone else. And I think if you look at the politicians that are benefiting from gerrymandering, that are benefiting from voter suppression, the ones who are receiving the largest campaign contributions, I mean, it's all really kind of one and the same.
I guess that raises a question. We always thought there were guardrails, that we couldn't just elect somebody and then have him steal everything in sight and make himself, billions and billions of dollars out of the presidency. We thought there was an emoluments clause. We thought there were checks and balances. And how did it happen over the same period you've been reporting on the erosion of voting rights, that there's also been an erosion in guardrails?
Well, I think a lot of it really does trace back to the Supreme Court and the fact that the Supreme Court, at the same time that it's dramatically weakened voting rights, has said that the president basically has immunity from criminal prosecution. The president has essentially king-like power to fire anyone he wants, even people from supposedly independent agencies. And all of that stuff has emboldened Trump, and it's emboldened him to be much more corrupt in his second term than he was even than in his first term. And I think he believes that he's going to get away with it. And it's hard to argue that he won't get away with it, at least from the perspective of the Supreme Court, because they let him get away with an insurrection and a lot of other things, and so why wouldn't they let him get away with all the stuff that he's doing right now? And so I think so much of it traces back to A, the Supreme Court, and B, the Congress. The Congress, those are the two branches that can hold the executive accountable. And right now, they've given him a green light to basically do whatever he wants. And so that's one reason why the midterms are important, because if you had different people in charge of Congress, maybe you'd have some accountability, or at least attempts at accountability, that are totally missing today.
So, these 15 years that you've been doing this have been an incredibly dramatic and dire period in our history. Let me make the statement, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't think it's unfair or partisan to conclude that the president and the Republican Party, and perhaps their majority on the Supreme Court, are hostile to the idea that all Americans should participate in our democracy. That's something that I couldn't have said most of my life, but I think the facts bear it out. What do you think?
I think that's true. I think it's undoubtedly true in terms of how they've tilted the playing field. They've basically destroyed the Voting Rights Act. They've dramatically weakened protections against voting rights in other ways. They've said that you can do things like partisan and racial gerrymandering to specifically target certain communities. And so they have really chipped away at the things that were meant to bring equality into the political system, whether it was the Voting Rights Act, or whether it was the 14th and 15th Amendments, or whether it was other protections that existed in the Constitution that have basically been rendered meaningless. And so I think it is their project to basically protect the power of this shrinking conservative white minority before it's too late. And I think that Trump's efforts, but also what's happening in Congress and really what the Supreme Court is doing has allowed them to succeed, I think, in rolling back a lot of rights that people thought would be forever protected.
Yeah, and scholars around the world say there's a sort of a global autocratic movement that had gained traction everywhere in the last 15 years. And it is stopping now, or slowing down, at least in parts of the world, as we saw in Hungary, where people fought an election that wasn't free and wasn't fair, and yet managed to throw out their dictator. But that called for something I don't know Americans have, Ari. As again, somebody said to me yesterday, it would be as if after 16 years of Trump, Americans got together, Americans who were, on the left and on the right and in the center, and elected Liz Cheney president, and were happy to do it. That's sort of what they did in Hungary, because they were so angry. They didn't pick anybody who would have been in their equivalent of the Democratic Party, but they all got together. Do you think Americans who still care about our democracy can overcome our competitiveness with each other? Will Michigan, for example, be able to get through a Senate primary and come together afterwards?
I think the U.S. is unfortunately more divided right now. In Hungary, the reason why Orban was ousted was because the margin was so big to overcome all the structural ways that he had rigged the system and to prevent him from stealing the election. If it had been a much tighter election, then all the things he did to try to manipulate the political system may have had more of an impact. And that's kind of how it is here, for example, with gerrymandering. Democrats need to overcome a 10-seat advantage right now because of how Republicans have redrawn maps in so many states. That doesn't mean they can't overcome it, but basically that means they need to pick up 10 plus seats somewhere else to be able to overcome it. So that is not at a baseline of free and fair election. Is it something that can be overcome? It can be overcome if the margin is great enough. But the thing that worries me about the political system is it seems like whether it's the Electoral College or whether it's gerrymandering in the U.S. House, Democrats always have to basically come back from the fact that Republicans are starting at the 40 or 50-yard line in terms of if you look at this like a football game. It never seems to be that both parties are starting at the same kind of place. Republicans always seem to have a built-in advantage in terms of how the political system is constructed. Now, I think we could have enough of a wave election in a lot of places to overcome that. But it's also true that it's still a narrowly divided country. And for a variety of factors, there's going to be a lot of close races, particularly with the Senate, and particularly the fact that a lot of these Senate races, I know you mentioned Michigan, that's more of a swing state, but a lot of these Senate races are taking place in redder states where Democrats are going to have to convert some people that probably voted for Trump. And so that makes the political dynamics a little bit different.
Yeah, my question about Michigan was more primary focused. It's a primary where the Democrats are angry with each other, and sometimes we don't come together after that. People stay at home and sit on their hands, which is
I don't know what's going to happen in Michigan because I'm not there. I think that people are going to be, broadly speaking, motivated to win back the Senate majority. And it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to win back the Senate majority without holding the Michigan Senate seat. So I would think that there may be some harsh feelings, but at the end of the day, I would imagine that the party would come together. I think it will also help that there's other competitive races on the ballot in Michigan. So it's not just Senate race. You have a governor's race. You have other important races, Secretary of State, State Attorney General. And I think that the fact that there's multiple races, and if Democrats are motivated to vote in all of those races, that should help the Senate race as well.
So you talked about how divided the country is. But in poll after poll after poll, there seems to be a very big center in America where people just agree about most things. And yet we divide on partisan lines, even though if you ask about a bunch of issues, we seem to agree, from data centers to the Epstein files to the war in Iraq to political corruption. Most people agree. We do. So do we need to move past the two-party system in order to save our own ability to vote? Do we need multi-member districts or proportional representation? I mean, there are more Republicans in California than practically any state but Texas. Their votes count for zero. There are more Democrats in Texas than practically any state but California. Their votes count for zero. That's probably not a good idea anymore.
Yeah, and the problem of gerrymandering has made that worse by basically, people now think, well, if I'm in a Democratic state, then all the reps have to be Democratic, and if I'm in a Republican state, all the reps have to be Republican, even if there's districts in those places that go the other way. And so that is increasing the level of polarization, and the mid-decade gerrymandering that we've seen in the last year or two have only worsened that trend. I think probably if we had a system that was more like existed in Europe, there would probably be four parties, to be totally honest with you. And there would probably be a far-right Trump party. There would probably be a kind of more moderate version of the Republican Party. I don't know how big that would be, but I think there would be some space for it. There would probably be a center-right Democratic Party, and there would probably be a center-left AOC Democratic Party. There would be at least four. There might be more. So right now, a lot of people are squeezed into the parties who don't really identify with it. And I think you make a really good point that when you break stuff down outside of the D versus R frame, there's a lot more support for things. But the problem is that people are incentivized to try to divide you based on trying to get you to vote for one party or another. And so, anything we could do, I think, to give people more choices or to try to get beyond those strict party labels, I think would be beneficial.
I thank you for that. And this division that makes us more partisan also makes many people feel more helpless. I mean, I live in Illinois. It's a big, mostly blue state now. right? But that means that the people in this state feel like their votes don't really matter, that
Yeah.
the action is in some purple state somewhere else, and that we don't count. I mean, so also it makes people crazy that they think that democracy somehow is somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's a good point, which is it's not just about Republicans disenfranchising Democrats. It's also a fact that even in very red states or very blue states, people don't feel like they have enough choices. Some of that means that the battles are being fought in the primaries, and we can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing, but in places where the election is sort of predetermined in the general election, those primaries become very important, like we saw in New York recently and like we've seen in other states. That can also push the party to one extreme or another, too. So that's not necessarily always a good thing. But I mean, that's where the kind of choices are right now. That's one reason, for example, why I think we should get rid of the Electoral College and have a popular vote for the presidency, because that would then convince people in Illinois or in Wyoming, either really blue or really red states, that they should still vote for president, because their votes would matter on a national level in ways that they don't right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't used to, but I do now. It's taken me a while. I've used to think I've changed about the filibuster too over time. I guess even an old man can grow. um, I I wonder your thoughts about the evolution of our parties. The Republican Party has changed so fast in the last 20 years, 30 years. You could say it's really radicalized. I mean, you don't recognize, I mean, from to go way back, from Nixon to, say, Reagan was a huge change in the Republican Party. From Reagan to W was a huge change in the Republican Party. And from all of that to Donald Trump, those old parties aren't even recognizable in the DNA of the new party. The Democrats sort of look the same as they always have, but now is their moment when they are transforming too. And as you can see in those transformational moments, they can be very dangerous. The Republican Party got taken over and radicalized. And what's going on in the Democratic Party scares some Democrats. And I wonder what your thoughts are about the transitional moment the Democratic Party is in.
Well, I don't think it's moving as quickly as the Republican Party is. You don't have one figure like a Trump who is moving it all in one direction. I mean, there's been very little resistance to Trump, honestly, within the Republican Party, and those people that
and they've ousted the ones.
They've ousted. They're gone. I mean, they're gone. I mean, you basically cannot be an anti-Trump Republican in the Republican Party right now. Maybe if you represent a really blue district, but honestly, those people are probably just going to lose anyway. So I would say what's happening in the Democratic Party is more contested. And I think the Democratic Party in general is a bigger tent party that can have figures with lots of different views and feel comfortable about that. And even if you listen, for example, to the recent interview that Zoran Mamdani did with the New York Times, he wasn't saying I want to oust every centrist Democrat. He's sort of even, picking his spots, the places where he feels like, he can exert some kind of influence. But I don't think there's one figure in the party. And I mean, even if you look at, the most successful Democratic Party politicians, I would say Obama is probably the most successful Democratic Party politician in the last, 30 years. And that was all about having a big tent. I mean, that was sort of central to his appeal, that yes, you'd be broadly progressive, but don't alienate someone. And I think it's tough. It's tough to be a party that just relies solely on purity tests and then try to figure out a way to win everywhere. Because the fact is, especially in the U.S. Senate, but certainly everywhere, I mean, Democrats have to win in some red-leaning places. Look at the Senate races that are taking place right now in Alaska, in Texas, in Ohio. I mean, there are some pretty progressive people running there, but I think it would be foolish to believe that everyone like AOC or Mamdani could win in Nebraska or in Texas or in Alaska. I mean, it's going to take different people in different places, which is why I sort of reject a sort of a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem. I think there's certain core principles that they want people to believe in. I think some of the things that they thought you needed to be for, maybe you don't need to be for anymore. But I don't think that just like that it's going to be like the same candidate's going to have to win everywhere. I think you're going to have different kind of candidates win in different kind of places, depending on what the politics of that place is.
Yeah, I mean, shockingly, Mississippi is close right now in a Senate race. And, Zoran Mamdani would get 4 votes. As talented as he is, he's enormously talented. He would get like 4 votes for Senate in Mississippi. But Scott Cullum, who's a Black former prosecutor, has closed the gap with Cindy Hyde-Smith in Mississippi. It has to be a big, diverse party to win in all places. And maybe the bottom line is, do you love the community you serve and want to serve it well? That allows for the differences of America to come through.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that generally speaking, the fact that you have some level of ideological diversity is probably a good thing. Now, the question is, are there some values that you shouldn't compromise on? And I think
absolutely.
but there's also things that people are rethinking right now.
Yep.
That have been held as sacred tenets, like, for example, just sort of uncritical backing of Israel, no matter what it does. That is something where the Democratic Party has dramatically shifted. And I think they've shifted in a way that public opinion more broadly has shifted. And so there are certain things that either because of the evolution of the party or just what's happening in the world has made people reevaluate certain things.
Oh, my gosh.
I think, generally speaking, that's a good thing.
And I think even bigger than the shifting on sort of foreign policy questions is the shifting on the question of how much process do we really need before we approve, say, affordable housing in a neighborhood. The kinds of things that Democrats have been part of building that have given everybody a voice but slowed some things down. And now I think there's a big shift towards I think this moment in the Democratic Party is not left-right, this fight, Ari. I think it is the difference between the old guard whose skill was let's make a deal, which was okay when the Republicans were a legit party that wanted to make a deal, and the new sort of push to get stuff done. And it's a generational shift too. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's naive to believe that the leaders of the party are going to be the ones heralding the shift. I mean, those are usually the last people who change. And there's obviously a lot of dissatisfaction with the transactional nature of the Democratic Party. This has been building for a long time. I think it reached a fever pitch in 2024 in believing that the Democratic Party was not broadly responsive to a lot of different things, from the fact that people didn't want Biden to run again to where the platform was on issues like Israel, Palestine. So a lot of things are going to play out after 2026. I think some of it's playing out in the build up to 2026, but a lot of people are just focused on trying to win back the Congress and win these state level races. And I think this conversation is going to become a lot more central after 2026 when we look towards 2028 and who the Democratic nominee is. And really, that will be a much broader litmus test on what the party stands for. Yeah,
I think so. Well, Ari, thank you for your time. Thank you for your reporting. Will you tell everybody quickly how they can find your stuff and so stay informed as we head into the midterms?
Yeah, they can read my stuff at motherjones.com, and they can go to my website, aribermanauthor.com, and they can follow me on Blue Sky as well.
Well, again, thank you for your time and for your great work.
Thanks so much, Edwin. Great to talk to you again.
Bye.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, I got a bonus today. Mark Jacob, editor of both Chicago's major newspapers when they were major newspapers, author of Stop the Presses, a fabulous Substack newsletter, and of course, a frequent contributor to WCPT, joins me now. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Edwin. How are you?
I'm good. I know you and Jennifer were on Joan's show recently talking about the media, and that's not really what I wanted to talk to you about. I actually wanted to talk to you about history, but I'm afraid the White House Correspondents' Dinner got in the way, and I have to ask you what you thought of that, of having it the way it was, and then of what it turned out to be last night.
Well, I mean, long before Trump, I thought that the Correspondents' Dinner was a travesty, and it just was a terrible look for journalists to be partying and clinking champagne glasses with the people they're supposed to be covering. I mean, it made it seem as if the media and the politicians are all in the same club and everyone else isn't, and it was so. I thought it was terrible before Trump, and he didn't come in his first term, and this is the first time he's been as president. And I watched the event last night. Unfortunately, I blew a decent day doing that, and it was terrible. I mean, it was his. The weird thing was he was, the media tends to think that Trump is amusing or at least is worth reporting on. I think in some ways mainstream media likes him because he provides content. And last night he was terrible. He was boring. He was rambling. He was stupid. He was petty. I mean, it was awful. I mean, I thought he did bomb. He bombed terribly. And I just wonder whether the people, in the audience were thinking, what have we done? But, they're all members of the same club, apparently. And so they were glad he was there. They thanked him, got a big hug from the incoming president of the Correspondents Association, who works at Fox News. So, I mean, I call them the Quisling media, the DC Quisling media, because they apparently have no concern with how things look and how they act, and they just look like they're just part of like they don't care. They seem to care less about democracy than everyone else in the country.
Yeah, well, that speech of his last night, and unlike you, I refuse to put myself through it, but I watched some clips this morning. If anything's going to change their mind about wanting to be in a room with him, it's sitting through an hour and a half of that kind of dribble.
Oh yeah, and I counted at least 3 black people who he called, low IQ or stupid, and he kept on taking shots at JB Pritzker over his weight. I mean, it's just petty crap. I mean, nobody likes that. I mean, who likes to hear some idiot ramble on for an hour with personal insults about people? And I just thought I thought it was idiotic. I felt I was losing brain cells the longer I watched it. Frankly,
Yeah,
it was an insult to the audience.
Well, I hope his audience felt insulted and that the
Yeah,
rest of their reporting
yeah, me
takes that into account.
Me too, but I don't think they learned anything. I really don't. I mean, the fact that they even held it just shows how much they don't understand what the moment we're in as a society, and the giant threat we're under right now. I mean, with this is a 5 alarm fire, and they acted like it was a cookout. I mean, it's insane the way they acted, and
Yeah.
it makes me really ashamed to be a member of the journalism community, frankly.
Well, in fairness, the journalists, and even some of them, have given us some good reporting about
Yeah.
what's going on there.
Oh yeah,
The look is terrible. I agree.
Well, yeah, but you had the situation last night where the Wall Street Journal reporters who reported on Trump's contacts with Jeffrey Epstein and won an award for it, then shook Trump's hand when they picked up their awards. I mean, which is absurd. I mean, so they reporting on, and Trump he sued them over the reporting. Right now, there's a pending lawsuit over their apparently truthful reporting, and yet they all shook his hand. I mean, it's there's so much cognitive dissonance going on in that whole event. I mean, nothing makes sense, and nobody's acting like they understand
Yeah.
the moment we're in right now.
I used to work in the Middle East, in a complicated part of the world, and people had just the ability to compartmentalize the contradictions of where
Yeah,
they were.
yeah.
And
I guess
that may be where we're headed. It's not a healthy place, really, when you
no,
have to just put everything in one box and another thing in another box and try and work around it.
not healthy.
All right, so I wanted to ask you about some other things. I mean, yeah, I know you like history. I mean, you wrote a book about a very important sort of historical moment related to basketball that I
Mm.
loved. So I wanted to get your thought. And this is the beginning, Mark, of a conversation because
Mm.
it's a long one, but about like, should we prevail? What is it going to take to put this madness behind us? And like how do you think about rebuilding government functions that he's destroyed versus rethinking those functions from the ground up? How do you how much and how far do you spend time really getting accountability for the wrongdoing, particularly when you have to work around things like pardons? And how, and even more important, because you think about journalism so much, how do we rebuild our own narrative of who we are as a nation dedicated to freedom and equality?
Well, those are some big questions there.
Like I said, it's a start of a conversation.
Yeah. Now, well, one thing, let me go with what you mentioned kind of last, which is we're going to have to rebuild the respect for truth. I mean, I think that he has torn down public credibility and the idea that the public can believe anyone about anything so far, and not just him, because frankly, Edwin, this isn't just a Trump thing. This is a Republican Party thing, and so then I think we have to rebuild the idea of what's truth and what's false. And I think I've been long saying that we had to make sure that in high school we had a course called BS 101. That trained people to know when they're being lied to and how to verify truth. Because I mean, this has been just a decade long assault on truth to try to undermine the credibility of everyone. And that's, you can't have a democracy when you don't believe in anything and you can't trust anyone. You just can't do it.
Which
So
is why they don't want us to trust elections.
right, exactly. They want us to, that way they can steal them and everyone will say, well, they're always have been stolen no matter what. As far as how, I mean, the real question, how do we build back, and what does that look like? I've thought about this quite a lot actually, but and I posted something on Blue Sky that said what was happening now was unprecedented, and virtually every historian who followed me, just attacked me, and no, it's not unprecedented. What are you talking about? It's unprecedented. It's not. There's been fascist and authoritarian movements throughout history. There's been and all that. So I won't say it's unprecedented, but
No,
it is
it's unusual for a president to be the nation's leading fascist, for sure.
yes, exactly. So I just think that we are in uncharted times, and so how do we build back from this? I mean, I do think, I gotta say, I do think you got to hold people accountable,
Yeah.
and I think you have to, no matter how you do it, you really have to just rebuild a reality. Now, in South Africa, after apartheid, they had truth and reconciliation commissions, and they went through and they said who did what, and they got all the truths out. There was not a lot of retribution. I mean, I think that they probably wisely decided that if there was too much retribution, they'd still be in the same bad place they had been in before. But everyone understood what had happened and who had done what to whom, and so that they had this established truth decided, and then
Yeah, they did the same thing in Berlin.
yeah, that was about to say, and after Nazi Germany, there was that too, and there's great value in that, because otherwise, all the myths and lies live on. But I got to tell you, I think one of the biggest mistakes that this country made was not throwing Richard Nixon in prison. I think that Richard Nixon committed felonies. I think he was a traitor. I think he did horrible things that were political crimes to hurt this country. And for him to just get a pardon and then get a library and all that other crap, I mean, I think it sent a message to everyone, especially Republicans who were unscrupulous, that they could get away with whatever they wanted. And then what did you have following that? You had the Iran Contra thing, where hardly anyone, at least, really got punished. And George the Bush the first pardoned everyone on Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Yeah,
had
Weinberger, right? Yeah.
yeah, right. And then you had Bush the second, lying, just flat out lying about weapons of mass destruction to support a war, and nothing happened to him either. I don't know whether he violated any crimes other than the crime of decency. But what I'm saying is that when you let people get away with crimes, they're going to commit more of them.
No,
And
I'm willing to share some partisan responsibility. After the 2008 financial crisis, after it, and Brock didn't cause it, he became president after it, but he held no bankers accountable.
right, that's right. And I guess he was thinking we should move on, and he didn't want to. I think he was naive about the whole thing. And if you read, I'm reading a book I should have read years ago called Dark Money by Jane Mayer, And it gets into how naive Obama was when he first took office about being able to pass health care reform and stuff like that, and how much he thought he could make friends with Republicans and work together with them. And they had obviously, as you know, and your audience probably knows, no, the Republicans wanted no part of that. They, in fact, they declared openly that their mission was to make him a one-term president, and they would not work with him on anything.
That's right.
And so I think that that's part of the reason that Obama didn't do much really do anything like as far as holding people accountable in a criminal way for what happened with the big crash in 2008. And so what's happening now, if you look at what's happened in Wall Street since then, they're going back to all the evil ways. I mean, it's loosey goosey time on Wall Street now because they were never held accountable for what happened, in 2008. And so, and this is just human nature that if you do something bad, nobody does anything to you, and they let you get away with it, you're gonna do it again. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Moral hazard. Yep. And
Yeah.
so it also gives rise to the feeling amongst Americans, and I want to add one more thing to that list, which is all of uh, the feeling Americans have that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a lone actor here, but that lots of powerful people are being protected. That there's just a whole class of people that gets away with stuff that the rest of us pay the price for.
Well, and the reason people feel that way is because it's true. I mean, and not just beyond Epstein. If you look at Trump's pardons, he's pardoning completely guilty people for reasons that they've done him favors or he thinks they will do him favors. I mean, I really truly believe he's selling pardons, and but I haven't proved it, so I'm just telling you.
My former Rod Blagojevich is in the business of taking money from people
Right.
to advocate for those pardons.
Right.
It's a motley crew.
Right. So whether he's selling pardons or not, he's letting all of his friends monetize the pardon process.
Yeah.
So at the very least, and the Epstein stuff, I mean, to me, you got to believe the victims, and the victims have been pretty consistent in saying that this went beyond Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and obviously it did, and people are being protected. There and the fact that that Todd Blanche still won't release the whole Epstein file really just says that the cover up is still going on.
It puts the two parts of what you've said together, which is to say you can't rebuild this trust without getting at the truth.
Right.
And rebuilding a sense of truth, and they're still hiding whatever the truth is.
Right. And it's not like it would be one thing if we said, well, Donald Trump and Todd Blanche should be releasing that stuff because it's the right thing to do. Rather, there's a federal law that Trump signed that said they were going to release all the stuff back many months ago, and they still haven't done it. So the guy who Trump wants to be attorney general is violating federal law to cover up the files of a man who raped children and trafficked in child sex. I mean, this is sicko stuff, and this is appalling. And the only thing that's encouraging to me about this whole episode is that some of us are not about to forget about it. And when you had the situation where nothing seemed to stick to Trump, he always got away with everything. Everyone forgot it. He conspired with the Saudis to murder when they murdered a journalist. There's a long list of stuff that would have sunk anyone else that Trump has gotten away with. But this Epstein stuff is sticking to him. I mean, I think that people know that it's disgusting that he was, part of the whole thing. I don't know about you, Edwin, but
and one of the things that makes me feel better about America, Mark, is that the people who first raised all these issues about who they're protecting, the people who first raised their hand and said, we have to protect these women, they were MAGA. This is where that movement started.
Right.
So this is, I mean, this is why I can't, hate my fellow Americans. I mean, they brought it to our attention. They were right, and they're not letting it go.
Right. Well, the thing about it is so much of the stuff that's happening in this country now is not ideological at all.
Mm,
I mean, it's not left versus
It's not
right.
left, right. Yeah.
It's just extremely rich people who want to get away with everything against the rest of us. I
Well,
mean,
that's what's going on with data centers. I mean, I don't have a, I am not certain how I feel about this technology, right? I mean, some things about it are stunning and interesting, but I am sure of this: the people who are building these data centers all over the country, they could have taken a little bit of time and tried to explain to us why there's a benefit for us in this, instead of saying you will comply. It
right.
doesn't matter what you think, we are rolling over you. And you know what? Americans aren't doing that. And Americans are turning to local government all over the country to say, yeah, no, sorry, buddy, you can buy a president, but you can't buy my county board.
Well, that's why it gets me whenever you hear somebody criticize, the socialist movement. And what, frankly, we've been in socialism of one sort or another for, a century now. So people don't understand what socialism is, obviously. But when you start criticizing the AOC types and the Bernie types, it just, to me, it makes no sense. And it's that it's that they don't understand that there's been a class war going on in this country for a long time, but it's been a one-sided war. It hasn't been fought by the working class and by liberal politicians. They've had almost no power.
No,
It's
they've only recently shown up to this fight after billions of dollars have been transferred from most of America to the top
right.
1%.
So we have a class warfare that's being fought by one side
Yeah.
for decades and decades and decades.
And they're shocked that maybe when we win, we're going to do something about it. Yeah, I know.
right.
Uh,
And why is Elon Musk so rich and powerful? Partly because of government contracts.
yeah. I want to ask you, it isn't, part of this is made possible by something else that we have to take on when we win. How do we deal with the naked racism that has returned like measles?
Gosh, yeah, that's a really good question. And I was before I moved to Chicago back in the 80s. Before that, I lived in Arkansas. My parents moved around a lot, and anyway, so I lived in Arkansas quite a while. And when I first came to Arkansas as a kid in '68, they celebrated Robert E. Lee's birthday, and there was just so many things that they had a Jefferson Davis Junior High School and things like that. And it just shocked me. I was like, wow, who won the war? And because I was born in the North. And over the years, I mean, I lived in Arkansas for, like 15, 20 years. And I thought things were getting a lot better. I really thought they were getting a lot better. And, and I think that was all a mirage. Because right now, in Arkansas, for example, you've got these MAGA Republicans in charge of everything. And they've cut up all the congressional districts to make sure that black people in Arkansas, and there are quite a few black people in Arkansas, have no political power. It's just they've taken the Little Rock area and they cut it in three pieces, so that doing the same thing that they did in Tennessee too and other states, where they just systematically try to remove any political power from black people. And it just makes me think that we're just way back where we started, and that maybe the "Make America Great Again" was really make America, white supremacist again. And so, what I don't know is what's in people's hearts, and I know it's in politicians' hearts when they try to manipulate people, but I mean, I just don't. I just cannot believe that there are so many people in this country who think it's okay to do the horrible racist things they're doing. What Trump has said about the Somalis that's pre-genocide talk. He's called them garbage. He's talked about how they all steal things. I mean, what is he? I mean, who would say when you say that about another ethnic group, and in just sweeping general terms? That's pre-genocide talk. That's Nazi Germany and Rwanda talk. It alarms the hell out of me. This kind of blatant racism and how do you repair it? I think that the truth is, Edwin, that I think that a lot of Americans were ashamed to be racist, and so they were quiet about it, but they didn't stop being racist.
Well, everybody I mean, that's probably right. to some extent. And I, even if you're being generous, everybody knows themselves and their family first. And it takes a while to see the world bigger and bigger and bigger as those circles grow during a lifetime and include more and more people. But you have to be open to that. And you have to
Right.
be able to look for humanity in everybody. And
Right.
then you get sort of stunned by how fabulous it is. And it's not just, I mean, but the racism we're seeing is not only directed at Black Americans, where it is, I mean, clearly they're being fired from the military and purged, and their histories are being purged. But also it underscores some of the ferocity of the anti-immigration stuff we've seen.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm just like I wanted to have the start of this conversation with you to at least begin to lay out the kinds of things we have to work on going forward.
Well,
And
it's a big question. I'd love to talk more about it too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate. No, I look. You're helping me think through this. I really appreciate it. Anyway, we've run it to the limit of our time, and the news actually isn't going to wait for anybody. So thank you, Mark, very, very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you next time.
Bye, bye.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, I have a real treat for you guys. Scott Cullum was nominated to the bench by President Joe Biden, only to be denied even a hearing by the Republicans in the United States Senate. He came to that, as an elected district attorney in northern Mississippi, at a 94% conviction rate, the support of both Democrats and Republicans in the state, from local sheriffs to former governors, and still Mitch McConnell and the GOP wouldn't give him the time of day. They wouldn't even hold a hearing. They wouldn't do their jobs. You know what? People don't like it when folks don't do their jobs. And sometimes they say, you know what, I can do the job better. So now Scott Cullum is the Democratic nominee, challenging Senator Sidney Hyde Smith in Mississippi. And this is an amazing race. So thank you so much for joining us.
Edwin, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your program. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well, could you start by tell us a little bit about your campaign? This is mostly around the Great Lakes audience. So as you tell us about the campaign, also tell us about Mississippi, the way you see Mississippi, because, around the country, we got ideas that are probably not right about Mississippi.
Absolutely. I think that, my story is a story of how much progress Mississippi has made. My family have invested in the community. They've had success in Northeast Mississippi. They passed down the values that are important, because values are important, right? They told me you got to look out for people. You got to help the least of these. You have to live your Christian values.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to put the truth above power and money. And that's been the values I took to my career. When I graduated from law school, had the opportunity to do a lot of things. I did very well in law school, but I decided to move back to Mississippi. I went to Wisconsin, by the way, so not far from Chicago.
Good.
To Madison. Yeah. And
good school.
I decided to move back to Mississippi and give back to the state that needed my potential. And in 2015, when I was 32 years old, I decided to run for district attorney in a district people thought I had no chance to win. The person had been there a long time. The demographics, they said you're too young. You don't have the what it takes to win that election. And having faith in the people of Mississippi, faith in my vision for the area, willing to do the hard work and build the support you need to win a tough election, we were able to make history and win that office. And I was the youngest person on my staff. I was the boss, but I was the youngest person. And being a district attorney is a good stomping grounds for learning how to be a good United States senator. And I'll tell you a quick story if you don't mind, Edwin, because I had a situation where I had a female inmate come to me. I was interviewing her about cooperating on a case. And she told me, I don't trust you and I don't trust law enforcement because I've got people in the jail, deputies and the sheriff, they're sexually abusing me. One of the deputies is giving me a cell phone in exchange for sex. And the sheriff is asking for me to send him news over that cell phone. And, I know you're not going to do anything about it. The sheriff's probably your friend. You guys are in the same political party, but I don't trust you as a result of that. And I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to do something about it. That's wrong. I don't care if the person was my friend or if he's a Democrat. That type of stuff cannot be allowed and it has to be investigated. And what we did is we had to investigate it ourselves because we couldn't trust them to investigate it. And we had an investigator send a text message from her phone to the deputy saying, "I'm pregnant." And his response to that incriminated himself. And then after he incriminated himself, he cooperated, and we were able to find out that it didn't stop with him, and it did finally end up in the deputies getting indicted, the sheriff getting indicted. We worked with our federal partners to get it prosecuted, and it was a Democratic sheriff. But right is right.
That is a great story. It's a
Yeah.
great story. It's a great story. I have a friend who leads the Democratic Party in North Carolina, Anderson Clayton, and she talks a lot about the fight to give birth to the new South, as opposed to a resurgent old South. And she thinks it's going to happen in North Carolina, but you have a chance to do it in Mississippi.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen in both places. And then it's going to continue to happen because the South does have potential. You look at Mississippi, almost 40% African American. We're a state that we've made a lot of progress that people don't necessarily talk about. We've got a lot of stuff to work on, but we've made a lot of progress. And that progress is also promise. For me, I look at what I'm campaigning on. I'm campaigning on things that matter to every type of working class Mississippian. Right now, 2024, we were promised lower grocery prices. Well, grocery prices are at a 3-year high, right? And that's
And you can't buy the lettuce.
Yeah, you can't buy the lettuce. We were promised no more endless wars. Well, we're in another war with no end in sight. We were promised concepts of a healthcare plan. Well, the concept seems to be we don't have healthcare. Right now, 400,000 Mississippians, both Republicans and Democrats, do not have health insurance, according to our Republican insurance commissioner.
Wait, 400,000 is a pretty big number. How many people live in the state?
3 million.
So that's a huge percentage.
And we're going to lose another, and they project that at least another 100,000 are going to lose insurance next year.
Because that's like almost 15%. That's incredible.
And we're feeling the impacts of it. I had a mother tell me she's got a child that's disabled who relies on Medicaid, and she was telling me how concerned she was about what these Medicaid cuts are going to mean for her child. I was at Clarksdale. There's a hospital in Clarksdale, Mississippi, in the Delta. It's one of those hospitals that relies on people having insurance through Medicaid and Medicare and the Affordable Care Act, and it's on the chopping block because of these cuts coming next year. Think about what that's going to mean for the Delta hospitals that are as old as you can imagine, employ people that otherwise there's a risk they're going to leave the state, leave the area. And, it's going to cause people to lose their lives. People are not going to have the health care they need in an emergency, and they're going to have to travel too far to get it before it matters.
Tell me about the campaign itself. What's the path to winning in your state? And, what's the grassroots effort look like? What's the organizing effort look like? I'm familiar with what that looks like in other places. I'd love to hear what it sounds like there.
Yeah, that's a great question because Mississippi is unique in the sense that it's got to be a lot of relationship organizing. I mean,
Yep.
A lot of people know each other. You got to organize the church community. You got to organize the labor community. We do have a labor community, and I'm proud to have the endorsement of so many of those labor unions. You also have to organize the housing projects and the daycare centers. You've got to go to the voters. I'm a big believer in campaigning and talking to voters, listening to voters, learning what's on their minds, doing town halls where people can come in and tell you what matters to them, but also going to festivals, I'm going to do a food truck where I go to the housing projects, going to the plants that shift change, finding out what's on voters' minds and connecting their values to my values and what they care about. Yeah. And then you start talking about the numbers. The thing that I think gets misunderstood about Mississippi a lot is that we have a lot more competitive elections than people realize. For example, our last Democratic candidate for governor got within 3 points, 27,000 votes from winning. Last year, we broke the supermajority in the state Senate in ways that were really impressive. We had a Democratic candidate that's in a 51% Democratic district, got 75% of the vote. And in the primary, I was able to, on March 10th, I won the primary, and we were able to increase turnout by 90%. Only an 8,000 vote difference between Republican voters and Democratic voters. Independent polling has me within a margin of error. And a lot of that's about corruption and betrayal. And we can
Mhm.
talk about what that means to real people, but that's the momentum we have.
Betrayal is a word I'm hearing more and more. Corruption we've heard throughout the administration, but I'm beginning to hear betrayal from folks who voted for the administration, which is a door opening that I didn't expect and a welcome one.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Clarksdale and I had a farmer come up. I was doing campaign. I went to the farmers market and I ran into a farmer. They say he was one of the biggest soybean farmers in Mississippi. All right, soybeans was one of our biggest crops. He said that he's been paying 40% more to get 20% less. The more is because the fertilizer costs, according to the Delta Farm Press, up 60%. Our junior senator, Cindy High Prices, I like to call us high prices because that's all she's done for the states, give us high prices. And what she did is she's taking money from fertilizer companies that are under investigation for price fixing. So while those companies are hurting farmers by collaborating to keep prices high, she's taking money from them. And our farmers are paying 40% more to make 20% less. And that's the type of betrayal that
They're feeling.
they're feeling.
Just to be clear, the she in that sentence is the incumbent senator you're running against, right?
Yeah,
Cindy
yes,
Hyde
yes,
Smith.
sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. She won a squeaker last time. I think she's not the strongest candidate in your state.
No, I mean, if you look at independent polling, I'm within the margin of error. Part of that is the fact that she has 55% unfavorables. And it's for her is, I mean, I could go on and on about the corruption. I mean, she's one of these people that gets corporate lobbyist money, PAC money, and goes to Las Vegas and stays at luxury hotels, eat at nice restaurants while people are struggling. So she's a part of that. She's allowing all the corruption we're seeing in DC that's just robbing the country blind. But she's also just, while you're having all these betrayals, Edwin, she does not campaign. She hasn't done a town hall in 6 years.
Really?
Wow. 6 years,
Wow.
not one town hall.
Oh,
Not
that is
one
a
town hall.
gift for you.
Yeah. And
that's political malpractice.
I mean, and she does not campaign. We had in the Neshoba County Fair is probably one of the more conservative venues. It's a big, it's famous because President Reagan went, he announced his campaign there. In Philadelphia, obviously, it's got a history in the civil rights movement that's very important.
Sure does.
But Neshoba County, they have a big speech every year where most politicians go to it, and it's really more for conservative speakers.
Mm-hmm.
I went to it, spoke at it, talked about my values.
Yep.
I'm going to put Mississippi first. She didn't show up. I mean, it's just incredible. She does not campaign. And she's starting to feel the heat, though, because we're doing, I mean, I wish I could show you my wall. We've probably done 50 town halls. I got a town hall today, 4 o'clock in Vicksburg, Mississippi. So if you're in Mississippi, you close to Vicksburg, you're listening to this, 4 o'clock, I'll see you in Vicksburg. We're doing a town hall. Then after that, I'm campaigning at a festival all night, passing out cards, talking to voters. And that's what it takes to win.
I love that. I just love that. I mean, I'm in a city where going door to door that's what people do. They just, but this may be the year where across the country, organized people beat organized money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you don't need money, and it doesn't mean people shouldn't contribute to you, by the way. We're going to talk about how to do that before we're done. But the big organized money in the country is Republican money, it's dark money, and it's vulnerable to organized people all over the country.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, I'm proud that our campaign, we outraised our junior Cindy Hyde Smith last quarter, and we did it in a big way. But what I'm proud of is Mississippians, under $150,000, and you look at her, it's almost no money from a person in Mississippi that's donated to her campaign. It's a lot of it's corporate PAC money, lobbyist money, and that's because we're building a campaign that's about people, and we're not just asking them to contribute. You're right, contributing to a campaign is important because I have to be able to tell the truth about why I'm running and respond to the lies that she's going to put out there. But it's also about getting people to sign up to volunteer. We have, yesterday, all week I've been in my campaign office since Wednesday, and we've had volunteers coming in every day, writing postcards to voters, making sure they know, check your voter status, make sure you're up to date on where you need to go. And it's just, so many people are stepping up in this moment because they understand the stakes. We haven't even talked about the voting rights, and we should talk about that.
I want to talk about it. Let's talk about the Calais decision, what it means, what mischief you expect, and how you're helping people prepare for it.
Yeah, so great example of why the Calais decision is such a threat to our democracy. Our Republican Secretary of State used Experian, the credit agency, to check the voter rolls. Experian, according to public reporting, told him this is not a reliable source to do that. Afterwards, of course, tons of people were
Got purged.
improperly moved to inactive status. I had a good friend of mine. I mean, he votes in every election. If there was an election for dog catcher, he'd vote. He's just that type of person, right? Moved him to inactive. He called me. He was shocked. Only reason he called it was because he voted absentee, because he's a deputy, and he had to be out of election. He had to be out of the county on election day because we don't have early voting.
Right.
And so he caught it and thankfully fixed it. And so the Calais decision allows more of that type of mischief to happen with less protection. But the good news for Mississippi is we're prepared for this type of battle, right? We're not new to this. We're true to this. So on a Wednesday on May 20th in the rain, we had 5,500 people show up from all across the state, all demographics, all getting organized around understanding the importance of making sure we protect our right to vote. And we have voters pick the leaders and not leaders pick the voters. And so what we're doing is we've got people sending out those postcards, like for Juneteenth, we had a day of action. We sent 2,500, I believe 2,500 note cards out to voters that have been improperly moved to inactive status. And then we're building a grassroots campaign with all the organizations that are in our state. We've got an NAACP chapter in most counties. We've got so many organizations that are excited about what's at stake. And so the Calais decision is a motivating factor in our state.
I mean, the history of voting rights in America runs through Mississippi.
Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, the what happened in your state when I was a little boy changed the country. It was brutal. And that is history that while they may be able to erase it from some exhibits in the Smithsonian under orders from the president, is never going to be erased from the hearts of people in your state.
Right.
I mean, that's the stuff that gets passed on from parents to grandparents to parents to children, because that is a proud legacy that changed the whole country for the better.
Absolutely.
So, and now that it's being threatened again, I imagine people are eager to rise to this fight.
Absolutely. I was at a community event in Bolton, Mississippi last night. And the thing that I've been saying that has really caught people's attention and really got them excited to volunteer, excited to donate, excited to get involved is, listen, our ancestors, they died. They were put in jail. They were fired. They risked so much because they understood the importance of making sure in a moment like this, we had the one power we needed to fight back. And that's the right to vote. And we cannot take that for granted because we have to make sure our children and our grandchildren can look back at us in this moment and say, we did our part to continue that legacy. We used their sacrifices to put ourselves in a position to make sure our children and grandchildren have an America they can be proud of. They have a Mississippi where they can go for their dreams, where they can be protected with the right to vote and equality and opportunity that is really all about what makes our country great.
And you have some actual protections for the vote in that state that other states don't have. Like, for example, I don't think it's legal in your state to move a polling place, right before the election. That's not true in a lot of other places.
Yes, yeah. And those are hard fought games.
Yeah,
those are hard. I mean, those were those, and with voting rights being under attack, there are rights that can be taken away now if we don't do the things that are necessary to protect the right to vote.
When you talk, I mean, democracy is a big topic around the country, but it doesn't seem to be the one that most motivates voters. Mostly it's like, I can't afford anything anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's crime. And I guess I should ask you about this. While crime is down in much of the country, it seems to be up in rural America.
Yeah.
And you got a pretty rural state. Is this an issue for you?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, crime is actually down in my district. So I'm proud that we're doing, obviously any crime is you feel bad for the victims and you try to fight to get justice, but it's down if you look at the numbers. I'll say, as someone who campaigns a lot, I mean, I really campaign a lot. What I hear is when it comes to crime is very interesting. And I hear a lot from males my age is they want something for young people to do. They feel like there's not enough recreational activities, there's not enough YMCA's, there's not enough basketball courts, there's not enough swimming pools. And they're saying we got to get stuff for young people to do because otherwise the idleness can be the devil's playground. And so trying to figure out how to communicate solutions to bringing federal resources to that it's been something I've been trying to focus on. And on the cost front, we've been trying to make sure they understand that they are paying more at the gas station, at the grocery store. And it's because of policies that are rooted in betrayal and corruption. Our leaders are not focused on working people anymore. It's very obvious about that. It doesn't seem to me that Cindy Hyde Smith cares at all about the fact that, there's a social worker who's having to hear clients tell her how much they're struggling. And she's hiding the fact, and she told me this, she's hiding the fact that she's just like them. She's struggling too. She's one emergency away from bankruptcy. And she's having to counsel people that are in that situation while dealing with that herself. And those are the type of betrayals and that I think are a motivating factor in this moment. And for me, I'm trying to talk about solutions. I mean, one of the solutions that I've been proposing is I am a believer in no income tax for anybody making under $75,000 a year. We got to do some quick, immediate things to give people relief so they can afford the things they need. I'm also, I'm not a fan of the tariffs. The tariffs have not been good for Mississippi. They've been bad for farmers. They've been bad for small businesses. They've been bad for people going to the grocery store. And if you look at the Constitution, it's clear that Congress is supposed to be the voice on tariffs.
Yeah.
I mean,
and by the way, they haven't done what the president said they were going to do, which is create a whole bunch of new American manufacturing. They just haven't done it. So.
Yeah. I mean, manufacturing is down in Mississippi. So, and so these are the things that we're focused on. And like you said, Edwin, to me, the big thing is getting people organized. People organized. That's once you do that, people can always defeat money. They can defeat lies. They can defeat anything. It's the power of people. And so we're doing our part to try to inspire them, organize them, and we're going to win a big election in November. We're going to win a big election.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Just in case some of you are listening want to help out, can you tell them how they can? I'm sure you're like every Democrat I know, their average contribution is like $25 these days.
Yeah.
But $25 makes a difference. So, what can they do?
Every dollar counts. I mean, really, across the country, anything that you can give. ScottColomb.com, SCOTTCOLOM.com. Every dollar counts. The Mississippi is a state that we can win, but we got to give it the attention it deserves. We got to give it the resources it deserves. And when we do, I think you'll see when Mississippi does well, the country does well. When places like Mississippi don't do well, the country doesn't reach its potential. So we got to show the country Mississippi matters.
Mississippi is I think it has the largest percentage-wise Black population in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So people around the country they look and they hear about some of the history. They just do not understand the vitality that brings. And the possibility of change that's behind that. That's just so fabulous.
A lot of people from Chicago got ancestors and family from Mississippi. I'm telling you.
When I was in city council, many of my colleagues were talking about their Mississippi roots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, Edwin. I've enjoyed the conversation, my friend.
As have I. I look forward to another one as you continue to make progress. Have a great afternoon and evening. I know you're full of stuff. And where again should they go? Where's that town?
ScottColomb.com.
No.
I'm going to get to that too. Also, Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Vicksburg.
We're having a town hall in Vicksburg, Mississippi. It's going to be exciting. I'll take every question that people have to ask, and I'm excited to listen to what matters to voters in Vicksburg. That's what I want to do, learn what matters to them.
You belong in the Senate. Thank you so much.
That, my friend. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Bye. All right, everybody, we will be back in a moment.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, here's a treat. Daniel Squadron is the co-founder and executive director of the States Project. Heartland Signal is a States Project property. So we've gotten to know him a bit. Daniel also spent time as an assemblyman in New York, where he learned a lot about how powerful state governments really are. But it's New York. So he also learned politics are as gentle as a hungry tiger. And that creates opportunities for voters. He writes about it in his book. His new book is called The Fourth Estate, and that's what we're going to talk about. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much. And not to immediately come in and correct, but I was in the state Senate, which is an important distinction only to people who are in the state Senate.
I apologize. I knew that, and I just thought the assembly was the word that covered both houses, not in New York. Okay.
And Heartland Signal and the States Project are owned by the same parent, but are not. The States Project doesn't control Heartland Signal. And the last thing is, It's the fourth branch, not the fourth estate. But I think we're off on a great foot with each other.
Okay, so that is utterly crazy on my part, and I apologize.
Gives me something to say to get started.
The thesis of the book is that individuals don't need to feel powerless in our democracy, in part because they can make a big difference in states, and states make the biggest difference in our daily lives. Talk about that.
On that, we couldn't agree more. That is exactly the thesis, and I do a thank you for reading it and talking about it. Really excited for it, especially because you think so deeply about power and democracy and the interplay, and so I'm excited for this conversation on that basis. So that's exactly right. I actually think that the starting point is people who look at our politics as it's talked about and feel frustrated or powerless. I want to tell them, like, I get it, and I'm actually sympathetic to that. I think admitting that is an important part of reinvigorating our democracy, not because it means we should be let off the hook for having the biggest possible impact, but because it means we need to keep looking until we know that we are having one. I do believe, as you said, that states are the place that impact can be greatest, both because even small amounts of new focus, attention, and activism in states goes a really long way. A lot of state legislatures get decided by one or two seats that are each decided by a few dozen votes or fewer. But also because states actually aren't sort of small ball when it comes to policy changes. In fact, in the last 15 years, I believe state legislatures have done more harm or good in our country than Congress has.
Well, I want to say, Daniel, that part of the right-wing project in America was to make sure that Congress couldn't do anything, right? And the Supreme Court was part of that. So when Congress doesn't do anything, the burden falls on the states to do a lot. And states have picked that up. They really have. And they have done an amazing thing for, as you say, for good and ill.
When there's a right wing, as you point out, the contemporary one particularly, that really has a goal to have have government be less effective, the state be less effective at all level of government. What they did is they used the idea that they supported states having power to justify undoing federal power, as you point out, to justify gunking up the works in Congress, to justify really unpopular positions that they still hold, like undo Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and unemployment insurance, and making sure the food we eat doesn't sicken us for a contemporary issue of the moment. Yeah. And so what that's done is it's created this world where there's more opportunity in states, because you sort of have an agreement, if we take it up, that this is where the government action should be and could be. And so this isn't about the role of the federal government that was so critically important in ending the evils and horrors of not just slavery, but also Jim Crow and segregation and other unfair laws in our country even more recently. It's about the possibility, if there's been this sort of commitment to states to get things done. So we see that with the fact that even big federal policy like Obamacare actually starts in the states, and you got to give credit where it's due. Romney Care is what it was called in Massachusetts. Hawaii did it as well. But also you see other issues, like when there's one of these big shootings that the country comes together in grief on. I talk about this in the book, like Newtown, Connecticut, a decade and a half ago. Everyone looks and says, oh, is Mitch McConnell going to suddenly change his position on assault weapons bans or background checks? And of course, the answer is known at the beginning, which is why people hate politics. But meanwhile, a lot of people don't know this, more than a dozen states actually took on gun safety, including with bipartisan support. In New York, Republicans and Democrats voted together on that, and that was true in a lot of other states. On issue after issue, you look to the federal government and you know the answer will be inaction. And then you look around at states and say, wow, something's happening here. How can I do something about it?
One of the best examples of the good and ill and how it matters is Minnesota and Wisconsin. They're two states that are practically identical in terms of their economies, right? And then after Scott Walker won in Wisconsin, he took the government one way and Minnesota went another way. These states were almost identical on all kinds of measures that matter for outcomes for people, and they started to diverge. And in the years since, Minnesota had, to use an example the right would love, a ton more private investment in the state than Wisconsin had. But they also ended up with longer lifespans. They ended up with better health outcomes. They ended up with better educational outcomes. So you're absolutely right. There's an absolute laboratory for the difference that local government makes. Same federal government, nearly the same demographic experience. They started from nearly the same place, and there was divergence.
That's right. And that just speaks to the extent to which states both do big things and also things that are felt in people's lives. And I think it is just so telling when you look at the economic development of the Twin Cities and the economic development of Milwaukee. Now, Wisconsin's a great state and has some real assets to it. And hopefully this year, I think its governance will change. But
well, really heroic politics to fight to win it back.
Yeah, and in particular, and it's been a multi-year project in the legislature there.
Yep.
I talk about a similar dynamic between northern Colorado and southern Texas in the book. I have a fictional minimum wage family, young family, and I say, where should they live? There's only 50 miles separating through the Oklahoma Panhandle, those two areas. Mm-hmm. Well, in Colorado, minimum wage is $15 an hour. So in Texas, it's only $7.25, which, by the way, is the federal minimum wage, because the last time the federal government changed its minimum wage was the same time the first iPhone came out. Federal government's on iPhone. So anyway, your minimum wage is about twice as much if you're a minimum wage worker. You have paid family leave in Colorado, so you have your first child. The mother can stay home. In Texas, she loses wages while she's in labor. Then, of course, either parent or both parents, if they time it right, can stay home and still get paid for up to the first 6 months of the kid's life in Colorado, not in Texas. Texas, speaking of Obamacare, still hasn't adopted Obamacare, hasn't accepted the expansion of Medicaid into the middle class. So even though they're minimum wage workers, if they both work full-time number of hours in a year, they make too much money to be on Medicaid in Texas, but in Colorado, they get it, healthcare. And so I talk about those differences, the really dramatic differences in life. You think of Texas's southern border being more relevant. And I got it wrong before. It's southern Colorado and northern Texas. But then here's what's kind of fun, because this book is really about looking past the narratives that are the national ones. Later in the book, I come back to the family. I say, you know what? In Texas, we gotta admit it. For each amount of energy you use, each kilowatt of energy you use in Texas, you're paying about half as much as Colorado. Your housing costs are significantly lower in Texas than in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And if you just trust where people are choosing with their feet, more people in the last half decade have moved into Texas than any other state. And so, by the way, those are outcomes that don't speak to the hard rights policy agendas. I'd actually say they speak to a different time in Texas, when it was governing in a more moderate or bipartisan way.
But also got to acknowledge that when you and I look at politics, we're looking at politics, but life is more complicated. It's got a lot of inputs, and state governing it isn't the same binary as the federal government, which is abstract. So you make a lot of different decisions. Collectively, they impact the lives of people in all kinds of ways.
That's such an important point, and I think there's a lot of hope in that too. So to come back both to your first question and that great point you just made, states are a place going to make more difference, but also where the dynamic that we assume is inevitable in the federal politics doesn't hold. And as you know, in the book, I have story after story of surprising outcomes, like in Nebraska. A Democrat who is in the supermajority in the Nebraska Senate is Republican. He was a Democrat from Omaha, the like little blue dot in that state, and he was elected into the third position of leadership in the entire chamber, with Republicans voting for him because they just thought he wasn't full of it.
So I want to talk to you about some of this is less policy, but legislative dynamics. Because look, you wrote about a very special type of bipartisan cooperation that you experienced, and I would call it the New York backstab. But maybe a better way to talk about it is the palace coup. I mean, those kinds of dynamics actually weirdly open up possibilities for people who care about issues to get stuff done.
Well, that's true. So in New York, back when I was first elected, I was originally elected to the New York Senate at 28 years old. I beat a 30-year incumbent in a Democratic primary. I got there, and as you point out, a palace coup or some kind of coup. Might have been a Three Stooges coup, if we're being more honest about it. But nonetheless,
Malice in the Palace, I think was the name of the episode.
Exactly. Shut down the entire state for 35 days. But it was also the case in that same dynamic where in that moment, the Republican Party was trying to regain power, so they were voting as a bloc, that on any issue at all, a single person could choose to shut down the state, to extract a concession on another issue, to make it pass. I talk about an individual who was a colleague of mine named Tom Duane. He was the first openly gay member of the New York State Senate ever. He was also HIV positive, had been an incredible advocate in New York City through the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, for equal rights for LGBT New Yorkers, and in a way that was more universal. And he was desperate to get marriage equality passed. And he was faced again and again with these choices about sort of who do I have to make coalition with to have this core civil rights advance move forward, and how do I do that in relation to my other progressive goals? Now, he ended up being successful, and New York State did pass marriage equality, but in a very different dynamic, and only with the support of some Republicans, and it was a couple of years later.
Yeah, I mean that also should give people some confidence that at least in the state level, there are moments when you can really accomplish a lot, and what looks to the outside like chaos is actually great opportunity.
So I mean, it really looks like chaos, and by the way, for good reason. I talk about it looking so much like chaos at one point that the New York Post, our local paper back home, superimposed clown faces over all of our faces on their cover.
Yeah.
For a lot of politicians, getting on the cover of a tabloid is, the goal unless you've been indicted. This was a new version of a low. And it's because, for good reason. I talk about the fact that a half dozen of my Democratic colleagues subsequently went to federal prison. All of this chaos, but the chaos is actually a combination of partisanship, principle, and just personal psychology. You can do great things with it. In New Hampshire, I talk about a woman named Rebecca Perkins Coca, who's this minority leader, only a few Democratic members of the New Hampshire Senate. She worked with a group of Republicans in the leadership that stood up to the Senate president to pass great housing legislation in New Hampshire.
Yep.
This is the thing. You don't want to watch sausage getting made, but sausage can be really delicious.
So I know this is the main theme of the book, but you do spend a moment on national history and some national things. And sorry to say, I don't think we can spend enough time on the story of the right-wing makeover of America. So, and you, particularly, you spent some time with Paul Weyrich in the book. And I just don't think the country understands the damage that man did, and the things that he created. And I anytime I get a chance for somebody who's talked about it to talk about it again, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about at least two of the things that he created at maybe the suggestion of Lewis Powell that ended up causing so much trouble.
Well, there's an interesting question as to whether Powell inspired Weyrich or Weyrich inspired Powell.
Right.
So there's the famous, something called the Powell memo that probably some of your listeners, a very, very knowledgeable group, is familiar with it, sort of the map for the right wing. But Paul Weyrich is a fascinating figure. And I have to say, I have really learned a great deal from him. Just very briefly, Weyrich in his early 20s was like a lot of political operatives, 1964, 65. He worked for a presidential campaign. That happened to be Barry Goldwater, who was the most conservative possible candidate, totally shellacked. Weyrich was despondent. Also in 64 and 65, President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act, the Great Society bills. Weyrich is despondent about that. He feels this is the loss of his country. But the most important and upsetting thing that happened to Paul Weyrich in 1964 and 65, when he was in his late 20s, was Vatican II. The modernization of the Catholic Church. He felt like his church had been torn away from him. And so he's upset, sort of the forces of modernity and the bureaucracy. He's working for a moderate U.S. senator, and he's the representative for that U.S. senator on the Civil Rights Coalition, because in those days, the Civil Rights Coalition was bipartisan. And he realizes sitting there, so almost like an epiphany, that this is how you get things done. You have to build institutions and build relationships with elected officials through them. So he quits his job and he founds, to your question, two critical organizations. The first one everyone has heard of. It's the Heritage Foundation, founded in 1972, the author of Project 2025 and a whole lot of other terrible policy and value statements. The other organization is ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the most important civic organization in American life most people have never heard of. What it does is it takes those same hard right principles, the idea of bringing back God's kingdom to earth through our government, to states. And it launders on behalf of hard right activists and whichever corporation pays the most, policy to state lawmakers on the right around the country. I didn't even know they existed until I had been in office nearly half a decade. But once you see them, you can't unsee them in American life.
Yeah, really important. And maybe I'll take a whole segment sometime on ALEC and how they work. It's fascinating, terrifying. I teach it in my class at DePaul. So I was thrilled to read that you didn't give them a pass in talking about this history, because it's just so important that people understand that they saw the direction America was going. They saw America becoming, they cared about the environment. They cared about civil rights. They cared about product safety, because some of this was like the automobile companies didn't like being told to put in seatbelts, right? And they said, we need to build institutions that will stop this. And that's, they were successful.
By the way, you probably know this, but Weyrich also founded the first ever conservative television network with a guy named Roger Ailes. That one failed in the 1970s, where Roger Ailes was then the founder of Fox News Channel, and also founded the Moral Majority, which was the coalition of politically very conservative Catholics and evangelical Christians in the later.
It was the effort to take abortion and make it a political issue, which it wasn't at the time.
And late in Weyrich's life, he was once asked sort of, who he thought were promising and important politicians coming into the national scene. Who he said? Mike Pence.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, the book is also, towards the end, about your path out of the legislature and into the States Project. So talk a little bit about the States Project, why it's important, why you're doing it, what the impact you're having is.
Sure. So in nearly a decade in serving in the New York legislature, I discovered that there was so much power in states that was really only wielded by the worst forces in our politics, and that no single state lawmaker could take that on themselves in the face of these hard right institutions. So I resigned my office and co-founded the States Project with Adam Pritzker. And the reason I did it is just in my district over the period between when Trump was elected and when I resigned in the next 9 months, I had gotten a group of people at a holiday party to get excited about the idea of getting involved in states. And that was so surprising to me that it was an inspiration to start the States Project, and an inspiration for Adam as well. The idea of the States Project is it gives regular folks the chance to become the most important players to help state lawmakers get elected around the country. Through a coalition or network of giving circles, groups of people who get their own name and webpage and choose a state they want to raise money for. We allow state legislative candidates in the most competitive districts to get off the phone with special interests because they have enough resources, instead of raising money from special interests, to go knock on doors of voters and constituents and introduce themselves. The States Project looks at all of the state legislative chambers that are up for election in any year and figures out the ones where the elections will be most important for who's in control of the chamber, and then creates a process to let giving circles choose which state they want to help fundraise for, and helps candidates in those states run campaigns that are as well run as states are important. And the number one thing we ask for from candidates is go meet your voters. Go meet your voters. There is one other thing we ask for, which is we think it's really important that any candidate we support is committed to the proposition that all people are created equal with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that government secures those rights with the consent of the governed. They have to believe in representative democracy. They have to know that effective government is real and important, that fair markets and personal freedom are part of what makes America at its best.
Okay, and this really important work, and it's had an impact on races.
It really has, so in some really significant ways. In Pennsylvania in 2022, no one else believed it was possible, but the States Project helped a bunch of candidates there. And the final seat to flip the Pennsylvania House, done by a single seat, 63 votes. Michigan that year, it also came down a couple hundred votes. Unfortunately, we lost the Michigan House in 2024. In fact, in 2024, the States Project was helping in 59 races that were decided by less than 1,000 votes. But as of the time the States Project was founded, and I was fortunate to meet that group of people who started the first Giving Circle and Adam Pritzker, as of that point, in competitive chambers, in competitive races, the right wing was outperforming by about 3 points. So if you looked at the national model, you looked at the top of the right wing was outperforming about 3 points. I mean, there was a bonus if you were a Republican state legislator in campaigns. Now in competitive races where the States Project works, the candidates we work with outperform the top of the ticket or the fundamentals by about 3 points. So that's a 6-point flip, and it's really important. And here's the reason it's most important. Donald Trump fundamentally believes in the centralization and personalization of power with himself. But the fundamental, most important tool states have is what actually James Madison said they do, which is they are the strongest force we have against monarchy or autocracy, as we would say today, in the country. And so states having the independence to stand up to any attempt to undermine competitive elections is the best way we're going to preserve them.
That is not obvious to people right now. And the Democrats have thought for a long time the Supreme Court was their protector, right? And they outsourced the work of democracy to their lawyers. And I think they went for a very rude surprise in the last few years when they found the court actually just reverted to its historical norm of protecting, rich people's property and not caring about their rights, and that they had to find some other source of protection. And it's been slow to dawn on people. The right wing knew it was the states a long time ago. Some of us watched when Biden was president. Governor Abbott in Texas saying, you don't even get access to the border. We're putting the state troopers in the way. And Biden decided not to fight that fight. But we learned that we needed to, like a book like yours. We learned that states matter. Now we have to figure out how they matter, why they matter, and what we do about that.
Exactly. And, I have to say, I am a true lover of democracy because I think that in democracy, when you win power, it's legitimate and you can be proud of it and use it. And I think winning power any other way is illegitimate. But it is still about winning power. And it is ironic, isn't it, that the movement that talks a lot about democracy now was so dependent on structures that weren't the most democratic.
Yes.
State legislatures are often not the most democratic today because they've been left to such a narrow group of special interests, but they have the potential to be the most democratic because activists, small groups of folks, first-time candidates can get in there. What I say in the book is if you have an issue you want your state legislature to be forced to deal with, get your friends and neighbors, spend a year following the plans that I lay out in the book. And within a year, your state legislature will be forced to deal with the issue you raise. You may win, you may lose, because in a democracy, sometimes you lose, but they'll be forced to deal with it. In fact, I'll say this: go buy the book and read it. If you follow the precepts in the book and after a year your state legislature totally ignores you, I'll send you a refund.
Okay. That, that's a dangerous thing to say, because people are going to be raising their hands whether they bought the book or not.
If you follow the precepts, notice, Edwin. Let's not, let's be sure not to edit it out there.
Look, I mean, I lived in a state where one of the reasons why people don't know their state legislators is this interesting phenomena that state capitals are not in the population centers of the states. So traditionally, the big media markets didn't cover it. Like Springfield, Illinois, where I am, right? There are two enormous media markets, Chicago and St. Louis, Missouri. And guess what's exactly in the middle with the weakest signal possible? Springfield, right? And Albany isn't the center of New York. The population's somewhere else. So a lot of stuff gets under the radar screen. And part of what you are urging is that people pay attention. And the collapse of local media has made this worse. But now there's alternative media. There's outfits like ours and others that pay attention to what's going on in state capitals, talk about it, so that we just have to tell people, we just have to let people understand, watch your state capital. It's an amazing amount of money, an amazing amount of policy decisions that affect your lives every day.
That's exactly right. Here's what I'd say to folks. If you think things are going great, if you think the democracy is as strong as it's ever been, that there's no regulatory capture that's making an opportunity vanish in this country, if you think things are going great, don't worry about it. But if you are worried about the democracy, if you don't like the policy direction of the country, if you're actually worried about it, then your job isn't to make yourself less worried because we live in a democracy. Your job is to think just for a little bit about how with any dollar or minute you have, you can have the biggest possible outcome. And if you think about that, you will find it is states. Now, look, the States Project exists to make it easier for you to find that impact in states. The book is an attempt to make it clearer what's going on so that you feel like you can understand it. Mm-hmm. But if you care about the country and you believe in democracy, participate in it. Don't see your social media feed as a source of emotional despair. See your country as a place that is designed to let you engage if you work at it.
That is excellent. That's excellent. You made a case for democracy as the only legitimate form of gaining power. I want to say, as a supplement to what you said about why people should be involved, it works. When you have a functioning democracy, you get better results for you and the people. If you don't pay attention, then the legislators frequently work for the lobbyists and the guys who draw the maps, and they get the benefit, right? Because it works. So step in and take the place of the lobbyists and the guys who draw the maps, and suddenly they'll be working for you. And it's amazing what we can accomplish.
And the number one thing that gives them so much power, they try. That's the thing I promise you. The federal government, by the way, it's not true. If you want to go and try to get Congress to take up your issue, and you drive down to DC, you should plan to stay there 10 to forever years. But in the state, the one thing I promise you is if you try, you can be as influential as a lobbyist. You just got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is an amazing thing. Amazing thing. All right. Well, Daniel, the book is called The Fourth Branch.
Yes, it is.
Fourth Branch. I should look at my notes once in a while. And it is, as we've been discussing, it is about the way state governments work, why they work the way they work, and how they can work for you.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to talk to you. Always learn something.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. David is back. You may remember, he's the man who identified the canary in the coal mine of American democracy a few years ago with his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. And he's now the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in Ohio. And he and Amy Acton, the nominee for governor there, are running a hell of a campaign in a state many had given up on. David, thank you for taking the time to come back and talk to us about the race.
Of course, I'm really excited to join you again.
Well, how's it going?
It is going well. I think we're right at the 100-day mark, and we basically are tied. And as I try and say to people in Ohio, you take nothing for granted. You don't get overconfident. But to be tied with 100 days in Ohio is a rare opportunity. And now we got to go out and grab it and seize it and just do everything we can to win in 100 days. But to be tied against this whiny billionaire who's spending millions and millions on TV and has been for March, we're still tied. We're still up with independents. Vivek Ramaswamy has never been less popular than he is right now. It really is a golden opportunity that does not come around much in Ohio.
I want to talk about the race, but just about, I want to get your experience for 1 second first. I found being a candidate for statewide office was an amazing experience. You meet so many people in the state doing such interesting things that you can't help but feel hopeful, even in a state that's badly governed. Are you feeling that?
Yeah, it is so true. And, you and I have talked in my past sort of iterations where I wrote these books and did these other things. There's nothing like being a candidate because it cuts through so much of the clutter. You're not sitting around watching cable TV as a candidate. You're talking to people every single day. And that does make you hopeful because you realize most people out there, they're just looking for answers. They have stories to tell you. There's so many inspiring stories. And they really are looking for people. Right now, we all know it. They're looking for people who are going to actually start solving problems of everyday life, starting with the higher costs of everything. But there is something, I was in Canton last night. I've been out in rural Ohio. We've been in big cities. And there really is, as you know, and I think if you're doing this for the right reasons, it's the best part. You just are uplifted. You're inspired. And even when you're hearing tough, I sat down a few weeks ago with homeless youth in Toledo. Mm-hmm. I will never forget the meeting, ever, about these young people who have gone through so much. They're advocating for their sort of fellow homeless youth. And we were sitting around a table. It was absolutely inspiring. So that's the part of campaigning that it gets lost when you have all the back and forth, especially these days with social media. But it really does. It reminds you why you do it. It reminds you why people are frustrated. They don't see more from their leaders. And it does keep you going amid all the other crazy sort of post-citizens united stuff that's made politics so much worse in so many ways.
Yeah, and if you do it right, I mean, if you're not spending all your time in a back room calling donors, but you're out doing what you are doing and what Amy Acton is doing, meeting people, you end up, if you win, much better at the job.
Yes, that's the other thing. And this is my advice to anyone running. Don't just spend your time telling them about you. Listen to the stories of everyday Ohioans or wherever, because you're always learning. You're always hearing about these issues. And I feel when a campaign is disciplined enough that you're, like you said, you're not just sitting around raising money, but you're out with people. And when a campaign is disciplined enough, the candidate will get so much better at being in tune and realize a lot of the nonsense that flies around on TV and everything else or social media is completely disconnected from what everyday folks are worrying about. Or the other is, what are solutions that we might find? That's why I love sitting around that table I was with homeless youth. Like, they were talking about answers. They were saying, well, if we fix the transportation system, if we did more here and there, we would have a better path. So if you're doing it right, you're always listening. You're always much more in tune, and you're always learning about how to solve problems. And again, it just makes you better if you, like you said, if you win, you're in a much better place to govern if you've campaigned this way.
Yeah. It's a deeply rewarding. People don't understand this. It's very hard to be a candidate. And it's particularly hard on your family because people say terrible things about you. But what you learn from the people in your state is a gift.
Yeah, it really, I couldn't agree more. And I do feel it. And Dr. Acton, she has been literally out on the road for 2.5 years and has had that sort of almost daily experience of interacting with everyday Ohioans. And so she's an unbelievable candidate in that way. She was a really strong leader when she was a state health director and got known that way. But she's even more impressive to me as sort of a retail on the ground, just interacting and engaging with people every day. It's really one of her great strengths, and I'm proud to be campaigning with her that way.
All right, well, let's talk about the campaign a little bit. Partly because of what you've heard, the focus is on how to make life more affordable. And I think just this week, there was a whole property tax focus tied to schools, which I think is fascinating. So I'd love to talk about that. And I think the campaign might also be a little bit focused on Vivek Ramaswamy, so we could talk about both.
Yeah, I mean, and you know this from our prior conversations, that we live in one of the most corrupt states in America. And what
By the way, as a man who lives in Illinois, I am deeply grateful for that.
Yes.
You took us off the front page.
Yes, if you look at HBO right now, I think we've got you beat. It's sad for Ohio. But what happens in a world of corruption? In a world of corruption, public assets are basically diverted to the big shot private players, and the rest of us are stuck paying the bills. That's why costs are going up across the board. So when they underfund schools because they are taking tax dollars and giving it away, trickle-down economics, the Browns get a $600 million bonanza, they underfund schools, and who makes up the difference? Everyday Ohioans for higher local property taxes. When we had a corrupt energy bill, our energy bills went up. So it's the same pattern. Like, corruption leads to terrible. It's not only doesn't just lead to, like, certain people making out like bandits, but the public faces and shoulders the costs of corruption. And so when we lay out a property tax plan, it's property taxes haven't gone up just because. They've gone up because our state for years has underfunded local governments, underfunded schools. It has been state policy to lift property taxes through this sort of two-step process. So we laid out a plan, and I don't care if you're in a blue area or a red area, people are all saying, my gosh, I'm making push out of my home because the state has stuck us with this. So we laid out a plan first, fully fund the schools from the state. The state has an obligation to fund schools. Not only will that lead to better schools, which we want, it will take the pressure off local property taxes, which are disproportionately paying for schools, as even the state Supreme Court found a few years ago. But the other thing we have to do in the more near term, and everything we're focused on is Mikey Sherrill said, the head of her campaign, it's not just about some long-term plan. People need relief now. And so we have ways we can broaden the homestead exemption in Ohio to relieve seniors of higher taxes who are literally being pushed out of their homes right now. We've got a proposal that I'm very excited about. It will basically be very sensitive to people who've seen an especially large property tax increase in the last couple of years, who are, working Ohioans who, again, the breaks in Ohio for 20 years have all gone to those at the top. What we're trying to focus on is the people working hard who haven't gotten a break, who are the most vulnerable to these cost increases and cost spikes. So we target those homeowners to provide some immediate relief for them. And we also, one of the things that's happening in many states like Ohio is the minute people get behind on their payments, some are getting tossed into sort of the world of private collectors. That often leads to predatory practices. All of a sudden, they're paying exorbitant interest rates. A year later, they're out of their home. So we're going to really go after those types of practices and make sure that people who, if some corporate owner of property is purposely not paying their taxes, yeah, let's go after them. But if it's some, senior or veteran or someone else who, for no fault of their own, because everything's going up in cost, is all of a sudden behind, and there was no way to not be behind, we want to make sure they don't get caught up in practices that basically cost them more and put them out of their home. So
let me stop there for 1 second,
simple,
David.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that, the right wing says, oh, we just care about, people who can't pay their bills. We're not focused on everybody else. But I just want to remind everybody that if you're a big company and you have, you run into trouble with a big bank, The first instinct isn't to foreclose, it's to figure out how to work it out, because that's just so much better
Right.
for everyone and for the economy as a whole. So this is like not, this is any of you on the right wing who are listening who think this sounds like a giveaway, you know what? You couldn't be more wrong. It's about building stronger communities.
Yeah, in this case, it's to protect against predatory practices that make a profit out of people's, struggles. And you literally walk around Ohio like we are, and you run into people who, a few years ago, they were perfectly, keeping up with their property tax bill. But the pressure has gone up. They've stuck local property taxpayers. Basically, it's been 20 years. Give away tax breaks at the top from the state, underfund services, and rely on local property taxpayers. It's been the most predictable sort of scammy thing. And so they're feeling it now. They don't see the connection to the State House, which is a problem. And they need some relief or they're going to lose their homes. And in the process, sometimes we know that people take advantage of that for their own profit. And what we're saying here is we are going to protect homeowners who are falling behind from getting thrown into the bucket of people who get basically turned into the target of predatory collection practices that not only cost them more, but ultimately they lose their home anyway.
Yeah, which just destabilizes whole communities. It's just ridiculous.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, that's just one of, we are laying out, our mantra in our mind is, make stuff cost less, just drive down prices. And they're just like property taxes, on healthcare. We have a plan. Actually, Governor Pritzker did it in Illinois. There are ways that states who've got their act together can alleviate medical debt that is burdening so many people. There are ways to go after drug prices. There's ways to go after, energy bills. And so the property tax thing was what we laid out this week, and we got a great response to it. But we are going to be laying out all the ways that we can help in this time of escalating prices, help Ohioans feel like they're paying less for things that right now just feel like together are overwhelming them.
As you've said, Ohio has been a case study in sort of I don't even know how to say it, corrupt corporate GOP machine. Whether that's a fake charter school company who rewards legislators so that they can charge taxpayers for students who never existed, or I think you just talked about like the private utility that gets to gouge ratepayers because politicians are paid to look the other way. What you guys are doing, I mean, this is so deeply embedded now in the structure of the political system in Ohio after all these years. Your campaign must be terrifying to those who have a stake in the status quo.
Yeah, no, it is. And especially the more they see, I think, a year ago when you and I probably first started talking about Amy Acton, I just think they thought, it's Ohio. Vivek's got all this money. There's no way we're going to lose. But the more that we've gone on, the more he spent. It's not working. Elon Musk gave him $5 million not long ago. They're really attacking Dr. Acton through just absurd lies. But what we're seeing in the polling is that it remains tied. She has a real edge with independents. Ramaswamy's underwater. And so what you see, and I won't go through them all, but they're panicking. And their panicking is showing up, and just every day it's more outrageous what they're saying, because they're figuring out two things. One, no one is buying what Ramaswamy's trying to sell. He does not look like some public servant hero. He looks like a billionaire, this whiny billionaire who's out for himself. His campaign is that there are multiple ways in which his own investments would be benefited by the policies he's pushing. People see that. The billionaire is paying for his super PAC. One guy's out of Philadelphia. This guy, Yass, he wants to end public schools. That's what's going to happen if Vivek wins. This is what this guy's about. So people see, I've been asked this enough. I now start asking it. Why would a billionaire be running for governor? A guy who moved his business to Texas before the campaign started. He went to Michigan once and said, Ohio's a good state. I can't say it's a great state. He says that Ohioans are lazy, mediocre. The guy doesn't even like us. Why would we want him to be governor? And why would a billionaire be governor? Is it to really help go to bat for our costs? Of course not. Is he going to protect our parks? Of course not. That's not why he's running. That's not why Musk is giving him money. And I think that basic question is why Ramaswamy, from the very beginning, has always been underwater. Ohioans don't trust him. They kind of see that he's out for himself. His origin story was that he claimed that he had a cure for Alzheimer's, which turns out to be false. So I think people sort of see that this just doesn't make sense. Why would you, in a time where costs are too high because billionaires are making out like bandits, why would you put one in charge? And so because of that, because he will never be able to sell any kind of positive to his candidacy, they are panicking, and they're basically turning it into an onslaught paid for by Musk and company against Dr. Acton. And, you know, this is the tar of the campaign. It's tough when they start doing that. But the good news is her brand is so strong because she was such a good leader that she's holding up as well as anyone could. It's tied. We're still up with independents, and Ramaswamy's lower than ever. So, yeah, they're scared, and we see that. And when you see, you know, this guy's already got all the money he needs, but now all of a sudden Musk needs to bail him out, I think they are really worried.
I think that's such good news. I mean, back in my formative years in politics, you know, we had Chicago's first black mayor was a man named Harold Washington, and he was running against all of the party money. And he used to go around Chicago and say, I get it. They want to pay you to vote for them. I get it. Take their money and vote for me. And that's what people did.
Right.
And, you know,
right.
I mean, right. They're going to spend a fortune. And, you know, like, I get it. Take their money, like, get the, you know, buy the ads. It's good for our economy. Vote for us.
Right. Yeah. And Amy, you know, Amy says at the end of every speech, you cannot buy Ohio. You cannot buy us. And I think right now the voters are saying, they're basically saying that. And by the way, a couple of things, because you and I haven't talked since then. We had the highest primary turnout we've had since 2006. On the Democratic side, our turnout was up 50%. The Republican turnout was down 25%. They're just not enthusiastic about Ramaswamy. Amy Acton got more votes for governor in a primary than anybody in the history of Ohio, of either party, incumbent or challenger. You know, John Kasich ran, for example, during the Tea Party movement in 2010.
Yep.
Amy got more votes than he did. And she didn't have a primary. It wasn't like there was a big contest to show up for. Democrats showed up. They were energized. They voted for her. And a lot, we saw in the data, some reporters looked into it. This wasn't just Democrats getting enthusiastic. This was independents and Republicans walking into a polling place. And in Ohio, you declare registration by what party primary you vote in. And they walked in and said, give me the Democratic ballot. I'm voting for Amy Acton. So there is real energy there. The other thing I'd say, you mentioned money. Believe it or not, as much as Vivek has this billionaire Rolodex he can call, since January, we have outraised him by $2 million. By getting contributions $24 at a time. So even though he's got all this advantage, we are outraising him. He was down to $1 million cash on hand, had to loan himself $25 million because he's been spending so much and it hasn't worked. And his fundraising, except for his own check writing and this Musk funded PAC, his own fundraising has been slower than ours, because we have grassroots support from all over Ohio, and he's sort of running out of gas.
This is the year organized people beat organized money. I love that. Love that. David, that one of the things that it's hard to remember, you know, because we run one election at a time. And like, okay, turnout was great in the primary. But turnout was great in the primary in part because of work that you and others have done in that state for years on campaigns to change the state constitution, on citizen referenda, Blue Ohio, for example, just the work that has taken years to get to this point where a very red state, which Ohio, has become, people are willing to say, I'm going to show up and I don't want to live like this.
Yeah, interestingly, you mentioned that one thing about Blue Ohio. This was a big lift by a lot of people. We are seeing a candidate, I think, in either every district or all but one in Ohio, which is, again, you and I have talked about this before. Leaving half these districts uncontested has been a terrible mistake all across the country. And this year, not just in Ohio, but all across the country, you've seen many, many states where there are 0 uncontested races, or maybe 1 or 2% uncontested versus only, a few years ago it was 40 or 50%. That also helps the turnout because you're running everywhere. Amy Acton is everywhere. She is all over the state. I am as well. A couple weeks ago, between Amy and I, we made 12 stops in 12 different counties, many of them who often don't see Democrats show up. But now we show up, but there's also a state house candidate running in a district that hasn't been contested in a long time. That also contributes to the energy we're seeing. And by the way, one thing we were very excited about, because as you said early in this race, this was considered likely Republican. Then it came lean Republican. And I think just a week or two ago, Cook Political Report called it a toss-up. Fox News had us as a toss-up yesterday. And we're seeing, again, as I think it was a Trump pollster that did the AARP poll a couple weeks ago that found us up 3 and winning 2-1 with independents. This pollster even said, even if Republicans, coalesce on Ramaswamy, which has not happened yet, we would still win based upon our lead with independents. So, with 100 days to go, like I said, I don't want to sound overconfident, but I also know people think, well, Ohio's red, you can't win. What we have here is a golden opportunity, a tie ball game. After $30 million spent by one side, we will be spending ours soon. We've raised, like I said, record amounts. It is a golden opportunity. We just got to grab it.
I think that's just terrific. And I just want to say, in the next 100 days, I think about what the Republicans are doing around the country, and I just can't imagine that they're going to have a massive personality and policy change and start doing things Americans like. I just think they're digging a hole as fast as they can around the country, and their president sure isn't helping them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right now, what are we? I drove from Canton home last night. Almost every gas station was at $3.99. They're literally, now we have a new round of tariffs. They are driving costs up with 100 days to go. What are we saying? We're going to make stuff affordable again, basically. We're going to reduce costs. And every single day for the next 100 days, we are going to be telling people we're going to make health, we're going to make health costs go down. We're going to make your child care costs go down. And so they are saying, not just saying, they are doing the exact opposite. And you can literally track the voters based upon gas prices at this point. They feel it. They see it. It's one other thing beyond all the other costs. And so what do we have to do? Spend 100 days just getting out there, getting all over the state, and being crystal clear from the moment we get there. Day one, there are things we can do to make Ohio, cost less for you. And we're going to start doing them. It's not just a long-term plan, as Mikey Sherrill said. It's from the moment we get there. Hell, don't do it on day one. Do it on night one. Before you're even sworn in, start getting to work on it. And I think people feel the need for that, and they're looking for that. And the other side right now is honestly a lot of VVEX plans are the same trick that those at the top will make out like bandits. And here's an example, Ed. He has said he's going to get rid of the income tax like Sam Brownback did, which destroyed Kansas.
For God's sake.
He was asked, well, how are you going to pay for that? Do you know what his answer was? His answer was, we have too many colleges and universities in Ohio. We'll just get rid of some of them. That was his answer. So Amy Acton literally is where she is today because she could commute and go to Youngstown State and work 3 jobs. Yeah. He would make young people like her and their families pay the price through fewer education opportunities for his tax cut for himself. And so when you look closely, not only are their policies lifting costs, but their proposals are more breaks for themselves that everyday Ohioans pay for. And of course, we're going to spend the next 100 days hammering home that with the VVEC, it's not just more of the same. It's actually doubling down on the worst of it versus our plan, which is to actually, make stuff affordable again across Ohio.
So the policy differences could not be clearer. The who are you fighting for question could not be clearer. The one other area where I think you have an advantage is, you talk about these are the things we need to do and get done. A lot of candidates go into elections and they talk about the things they want to do, and then they get in power and they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how the government works.
Yeah.
They don't know how to deliver anything. And Vivek is that kind of guy. From like, he's going to fly in and pretend that this is a small startup when it's a state government,
Right.
and be clueless. You guys actually
Absolutely.
have seen this machine. You know how to make it work. So you have a chance to deliver on these promises, and in fact, to deliver on ones that aren't really the ones that you're talking about in this campaign, like just make transit work better or things like that people
Right.
want.
So Dr. Acton, literally, if you were in Ohio, she was at the right hand of Mike DeWine throughout the pandemic. So she literally saw and operated all of government. People in Ohio saw that. So she walks in there knowing what to do as well as anybody could. I was a local, we haven't done this. I was a city council member, county commissioner, so I know the local level well. Ramaswamy's never, except for the few days he was at Doge before he got fired, this guy's never been involved at all. Why would you make a billionaire who doesn't like Ohio, who has no public service experience, whose ideas are off the charts nuts, like get rid of all revenue and say everything's going to be wonderful and we'll just cut schools? Why would you ever put him in charge? He's nowhere. He's never been anywhere near public service. The community college idea is a perfect idea. He approached that as some kind of private equity VC guy. Oh, there are just too many of them. We'll just get rid of some of them. If you were to get rid of what he's saying, you wouldn't just decimate opportunities for young people. You would be nuking the economy of multiple towns across Ohio who rely on that local campus as the heart of their community. So he shows up with his sort of, hedge fund or private equity mindset saying, we'll just consolidate them. By the way, who was one of the first people to say that idea made no sense? The Republican governor of Ohio said he just doesn't know the state very well, or he wouldn't say that. So you're absolutely right. Like he is completely unfit to walk in and try and lead this state. And by the way, we are seeing a lot of folks who normally would just line up for the Republican not do so here, because the more he says, the more it's becoming clear to people that that's a real problem with his candidacy.
All right, before we go, just a little bit of time, because you're so good at this. Could you put your race in the context of the struggle the whole country is facing?
Yeah, I do think that we are seeing, this is a very important year long term for the country. And I do think trying to make progress and gains in states beyond where we normally expect to compete, places like Ohio and Iowa, is really important. And I think that makes this year, it makes states like Ohio very significant in sort of the broader conversation. And, we're obviously, our first priority is Ohioans, turning Ohio around. One of the things about me is and I joke about this, but I was once named in college the most likely to be president of the Cincinnati Board of Tourism, because I'm literally wearing a Reds hat as we talk. Like I have been proud of my state and my city my whole life. They used to say to me, "Hey, you're from Ohio. You're from the Midwest." I'd say, "I'm not from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio." Like it was like we stood alone. So the biggest driving force for Amy and myself is this was a state that people grew up proud to be from. We were, I brag about John Glenn and Neil Armstrong and presidents and, all of it. And to see the state now be the most corrupt, to see outcomes falling, to see young people leaving because they think it's so toxic, it's just unacceptable if you grew up proud of Ohio like I did. And all the assets I bragged about as a young Ohioan, they still are here. But broken, corrupt politics have squandered it, and it's turned our state into something, and sometimes you can't really recognize. It's so divided. And again, most importantly, for everyday Ohioans, it's too expensive. And for a lot of, if you look at most measures, they're not where they should be for a state with all the assets. So there are clearly national implications. But first and foremost, you run around Ohio right now, we need to make this great state, great based on its assets, perform as well as we deserve. We have a right to be doing better in the state. And I think Ohioans are seeing that finally. They're seeing that we're not doing as well as we should be, and their lives are not what their lives should be. And with the change in leadership after decades of one side squandering it, let's start making Ohio what it was that we were all so proud of not long ago, and that can be again.
That is terrific. On a different race in your state, you have an important Senate race too going on. How's that going? I mean, some of the same dynamics are there.
Very similar. I mean, Sharon and Amy are very complimentary of each other. I always thought this beginning when I saw Sharon was going to run again. I think they bring different they bring different groups together that makes for a very robust coalition. And so I think the races will generally sink or swim together. And we've generally seen it varies a little bit, but we've generally seen the polling be about the same in both. They're different. The dynamics of the races are slightly different, but we're seeing it. We're seeing them generally going up and down together. And I think if Amy wins, I think it's very likely that we also win the Senate race. And obviously that has a huge national implication as well as an implication for the state. So Sharon is working very hard. He's all over the state, just like we are.
All right. I think you said you're raising money $24 at a time. Is that what you said?
The average grassroots donation is $24 each. Okay, so it is.
Hang on. If anybody is listening and wants to contribute $24 right now to help fix the country by rescuing Ohio, David, where do they go?
actonforgovernor.com. And we appreciate any help we can get. And by the way, a couple weeks ago, it hasn't been true, I think the last 2 weeks, for a number of weeks in a row, we were one of the top 5 races on Act Blue when they total it up. We were the only non-federal race. It was a bunch of Senate races and Amy acting for governor. So I think people are really captivated by her, and they're captivated by what we talked about, the opportunity to win Ohio. When you're battling a billionaire, as Amy says, the rest of us need to link arms and battle back. That's the only way we can take on that level of power. Again, Elon Musk dropping $5 million. This guy from Philadelphia, $20 million. Vivek, his own money. The only way to battle that is when everyone else says enough. We are not being bullied. We're not being bought by these people. We know they're not there for us. And so that support is really helping us keep up with this guy. And especially as we hit the final 100 days, all of it really matters. It really will help us push back, fight back, clear up the lies that they're spreading, but also especially explain to people how from the moment we get there, we are going to reduce costs that every Ohioans are being overwhelmed by.
All right, David, that's going to be our last word. I know you got to get back on the campaign trail. It's great to catch up with you, and good luck out there.
Thanks so much. Always good to catch up with you as well. Take care.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
I'm not on mute. Sorry about that. I'm at 773-763-9278. And before we take calls, I just want to put a quick plug in for my friend Ben Jarofsky, whose show airs here at 5 o'clock. And this week he's got J.B. Pritzker on, so that'll be kind of fun. All right, Jim, let's go.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Edwin. If I go down memory lane for a minute, Jefferson's 2 terms, he ran as the Republican Democratic Party against the Federalist Party, and there was acrimony right from the beginning. He didn't like Adams. He didn't like Hamilton, and the press would take a side, the Federalist side or the Republican Democratic side. So there's acrimony right from the beginning. That spread the states, the few states that were there at the beginning. But the reason they bring it up is because, then they dropped the Republican part in the Democratic and took Democratic from the French because that's a Democratic term. And the Federalists turned into the Whigs and the Know-Nothings, and they're both virulent anti-immigrant. But the reason I bring it up is because you've heard of the Federalist Society, these original judges that belong to the Federalist Society. I'd like to, what was the philosophy between the two parties? And this is 1804, 1806, 1807. that separated the two, and even separated states. I don't know. I never really see that fleshed out in history. And then when you ask the current Supreme Court judges, are they going back to the Federalist Party in 1807? I can't imagine when they call them originalists. They call themselves originalists. I just ponder that because what do they mean? They want to go back to the beginning of the 19th century, I guess, and then because they seem to be anti-immigrant, they don't seem to have any mercy for the immigrant. What do you think, Edwin? I don't know.
I think the Supreme Court uses originalism or textualism as a fig leaf to cover what they really are, which is politicians in robes, and they're seeking certain outcomes. They don't apply these ideas as goofy as they are. They don't even apply them consistently. So it gives them too much credit.
Yeah, but I'd like to hear him on a panel somewhere for the American public to explain that position, because it's diametrically opposed to my position and the three judges, obviously, because you've read their opinions. It's like they're like on two different planets. I mean, how long can we continue like that? It's just insane. But anyway, what can we do? We're stuck with it for the time being.
No, we're going to take on the court when we win. We know we have.
I know we will. Yeah, but remember, what's really important is the power of the purse. We're not going to be able to get much done as Democrats, but at least we could stop some of this insane spending around the world. Save some lives in the meantime. Hey, yep. You have a great weekend. Thank you.
You too, Jim. Thank you, Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Edwin. Been a while. I got to share with you out of this opinion piece from up in my UP paper. And this lady was from the southern portion, but she wrote, "Beliefs challenged." She says, "Did you vote for Trump to stop abortions? Then justify him killing over 1,000 civilians with 180 children in Iran. They did not enlist. Did you believe his campaign lies, including no more forever wars, started unjustified Iran war? Trump's ICE killed Renee Good, Alex Preddy, Isaias Barbosa, Keith Porter, Lorenzo Arroyo, and Joan Guerrero, and 55 died in inhumane ICE detention. Trump ordered illegal killings of over 200 Caribbean boaters and caused 57 to 83 deaths while illegally kidnapping the Venezuelan President Maduro. Thou shalt not kill." So if his killing of innocents doesn't upset you, does pedophilia? Why is he not following the Epstein Files Transparency Act? What is he hiding? He was found liable, meaning guilty, of sexual assault. Thou shalt not commit adultery nor covet thy neighbor's children. I'll fix the economy, really? Hamburger was $10 a pound, tariffs, unaffordable health care, child care, housing, gas, groceries. I'll drain the swamp. His cabinet is wealthier than all prior U.S. cabinets combined. Trump's first-term businesses took in at least $7.8 million in illegal emolument payments from 20 foreign governments. He showed over $2 billion in total income during just the first year of his second term, with a salary of $400,000. He and his associates are the swamp. Didn't an angry Jesus flip over tables of vendors and money changers exploiting the poor? Believed his fictional TV show that he's a smart businessman. Man up and watch. There's a 3-minute video she gives the site, and it says on some of his over 20 failed businesses and bankruptcies. Trump's had to pay more than $2 million in court-ordered damages to 8 different charities when Donald illegally used funds donated for veterans on his own political ambitions. Thou shalt not steal. Conservative, fiscally, laughable. While many of his cannot afford essentials, Trump trashed the East Wing of the People's House for a $600 million ballroom and billions in vanity ego projects that come out of Forbes. The disastrous reflecting pool is already $12 million over budget. His unnecessary war, $80 to $100 billion. Repainting Eisenhower Building, $7.5 million. The Arch, $100 million. National Garden of America, Heroes, $40 million. Paving over Rose Garden, $1.9 million. UFC birthday party, over $60 million. Military parade, 25 to 45 million plus $16 million to repair the road afterward. Thou shalt not cover taxpayers' money for your own ego. Think very hard before voting for Republicans or Trump's endorsed candidates ever again. Be smart, vote for Democrats.
Well, that's a good list.
Oh, this was fantastic. And like I say, it's a small paper, and that's why I thought it'd get a whole lot more coverage with the show. So
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean,
I just, thanks for letting me spill it out. But I mean, that was great. That's why I had to share it with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good week, Edwin.
You too. All right, let's head west and talk to Paul.
Well, I wish Dave would have mentioned the name of the magazine or the paper and the author of that article, because Trump is just taking barrage in Michigan. I surf conservative talk radio, and one of the stations I tune into is, since I'm from Michigan, it's the once great WJR in Detroit, AM 760. And that has now been purchased by Cumulus probably, 30 years ago. But it's conservative talk radio now, and it's astonishing. I haven't listened in a while. I tuned in twice this past week, and they had all Democratic candidates on. They had Saeed on. They had a Democratic candidate for the 10th district in Michigan, opposing John James. John James is running for governor. He's going to get absolutely stomped. And the regular callers that they call all the time, one of them, a guy who's actually from Windsor, is a complete Trump nut. He said, well, I was all for Trump, but that's a disaster. Of course, he hasn't changed much. He said, we got to get somebody with brains in there. I wish Tucker Carlson would run. So, he's still the same guy, but I can't see how, Michigan's turned that way. And so what it leads me to believe is that Trump he's going to become aware of this. He must know. And so he's going to do something. He's going to do something extreme, Edwin, in the next 60 days. So what's that going to be? It's going to be something, because he's got to win these people back over. These are people that supported him, and this is the base that's leaving him. They are, and that, I wish Dave would have said it. Maybe he'll say next week what paper, and bring it up again, Dave, Jones show. There's I don't know if you're familiar with I think it's an online magazine in Michigan. It's online. It's called Bridge Michigan. And great. I heard an interview with the author, Kelly House was her name, who was talking about the fires in the Northwest Territories. And I mean, it was a fantastic article. At least the interview was. What she wrote, I couldn't say that she left anything out, and said this is climate change. This is not, this is not forest mismanagement. I mean, they're just smashing. People are coming out and smashing these right-wing myths about, how are you going to manage the forests in Northwest Territories? It's 520,000 square miles, right? You don't manage, and there's no roads. There's nobody lives there. You don't manage natural forest land like that. And it's just, so Trump's going to do something, and he's considering, he says, the largest attack ever on Iran. So what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. He also said, "Oh, they're back. They want to negotiate." Whatever he says, you can't believe. But when you say he's considering something dramatic, he's already done tons of things that are dramatic. They're dangerous for the country, but they're not helping him. And anything else he does, even to top the terrible things he's already done, it's not going to win anybody back. It's just going to be more drama that drives people away and hurts people. I think people are sick of him hurting people.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess he could resign and let J.D. Vance pardon him. That would be popular, sort of.
All right, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, he's done things that are bad, but I'm thinking of the completely ne'er-do-well child who, he's been a pain during the whole time we've all been there, but then he decides I really got to have attention. and does something that you say, okay, now you've done it, and that's like broke something or did something really dramatic to get attention. And this is what this guy is. This is what he's done all his life. Is that there's no limit. There's no limit to. There's no red line for him. There's no bright line for this guy.
I agree with you. So I think he's already done these things. And if he does another one, Insurrection Act or whatever it is he thinks he's going to do, that's horrible, dangerous, unconstitutional, cruel, bad for the country, it isn't going to help. It isn't going to help him. But once the country makes up its mind, you know what, we can be pretty sturdy people. And we've made up our mind. We are done with this man.
I still think that in his mind, I don't know if he's mentioned it, that he's talking about a tactical nuke on Iran. And just will these morons, this Pete Hegseth, this guy is a complete, I don't know. There's something wrong with that man. I mean, I don't know if he's stopped drinking or what. He's exactly the type that it doesn't matter whether he stops or not. He is always going to be a drunk, whether it's dry or not. And he would. This is.
I don't believe a soldier would drop that bomb. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't believe it, Paul. I mean, he may order it. God knows he doesn't care about human lives at any scale. Pete Hegseth may say yes because he's a bootlicker on his best day. But I just don't believe the men and women of the armed services would obey that illegal, unconscionable violation of international law.
I hope not, but there's more to come. You'll grant me that, won't you? There's more to come.
Yeah, of course, there's more to come.
I mean,
there'll be more to come and more damaging things every moment. We agree on this. I'm an optimist, but I also know that every day those people are in office, our country gets weaker, our country gets further damaged, the world is hurt by them. It's just we are not safe while they're in office. I agree with that. But that doesn't mean they're going to be able to stay.
I don't understand why the Democrats aren't pointing out now when Trump, it was the expiration of the 150 days that he had the tariffs he can put on, even though the court said he couldn't. There was the exception in the federal law that was still BS anyway. And now that expired on Friday or Thursday.
Right,
and
so he's now got new
tariffs.
tariffs.
Down 50%. What's that?
Yeah, now he's got the new ones. So, and on cue, we went to court. The litigation is happening. We are fighting within the bounds of the law. We're in court saying it's illegal. We're telling Americans this idiot is just continuing his tariffs that are raising prices on everything, and not creating new jobs.
But the the Republican the zero Republican Congress is letting them do it again. The prices are increasing because they are letting them do it. Edwin, I went to the grocery store.
They've made a suicide pact. They've made a political suicide pact. They are going down with this. They've just they're for whatever reason that's
fewer people.
Yeah.
I mean,
all right. Hey,
2 people is a good.
I got 3 more I want to get in. But thank you as always.
All
right, Roosevelt, Al, and Richard, if we can get to you.
Real quick, Double E, how you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
Okay. So, did you hear the ridiculous thing this guy said about our 4 fallen young people that died in this Iran war? He said that they had told him that they didn't want Iran to have a nuclear war. In other words, he used their death.
He lied. He put words in their mouths. It's disgraceful to politicize this horrible. 18 people have been dead. He erased 4 from the website of the. He just erased them because he said, "Oh, well, we weren't at war during a couple of weeks when we had my supposed peace," right?" And then he did this terrible thing to these people. I mean, look, the only reason Americans die the only legitimate reasons Americans die in war is to keep us free. And no president who sends us to war for any other reason is sending them legitimately to war. And he sent them to war to steal oil from Venezuela, and he sent them to war in in Iran for God knows what, because he hasn't even told us, but it isn't to keep us free. So, and he's negotiated to give the Saudis a nuclear weapon. So go figure. Disgrace.
And I don't know if you've heard of this one, but now Barron is in on this $1 million thing. From what I understand, there's a Democrat that wants an investigation done. How does a kid that's 20 years old become a millionaire all of a sudden? And then the Tristan Tate, the Tate brothers, they're connected with this thing, and together with Epstein. All these people hang around, all these awful people, Double E, that cause all this horror and that cause this death and suffer.
Did you get invited to their party, Roosevelt? I didn't get an invite to their party.
I didn't invite.
I don't think Paul, who was on before, got an invite to their party. I'm sure Jim didn't. And it's not because, we're no fun or we're not good people to be with, but you know what? They want to hang around with the people who will aid and abet their crimes. Yeah. That rules out good people like us.
It's horrible what's going on. And I'm sorry to say, but these roundups or whatever you want to call it with the, undocumented people.
Yeah, terrible.
I just saw another case in, Michigan, I think, where they left the kid by himself because they took the father. They just took the father and left the kid there. It's a cruelty.
Monsters.
Thank you, Double E.
Thank you, Roosevelt. Thank you. All right, Al. Al?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, everyone, very good show as usual. You're finding great people who are trying very hard to make a difference here. And there's so much going on right now. And you mentioned, the loss of local media. But the other thing we got to remember is that how much national media has changed, because it is now become consolidated and become a bullhorn for the oligarchs, for those with the money, and that's one of my big points, is it's all money that is leading us here, and yes, and everything is won by so few votes because they are using the money against us. And you mentioned Alec, and that's been out there for a while. We have the Heritage Foundation. We have all these people. If they weren't there, we'd be doing so much better. And then on what happens when we get back in power, we know what we need to do. We just need to keep Trump in check for 2 years, get a Democrat in there, and then we have written all the laws already. We just have to bring them back. We have to remove all of his executive orders that can be done right now, and we gotta make people realize that the people who are fighting for a better democracy are the Democrats and not the Republicans, because that's where they got us, is in the media and how much they are able to brainwash people. But we're figuring it out. We're figuring it out. We're learning, and we got to keep doing it and keep trying our best to get past this.
Thank you, Al. And we are figuring it out. I mean, I'll just give you 3 examples that I'm part of in my life about the media, right? I used to, after all, run a legacy media, the Sun-Times, right? But now there's a lot of consolidation, as you point out, and yet Heartland Signal, which WCPT is part of is growing, and it's growing in other states as well. And we are spreading the truth in these states. I work with Lincoln Square Media. This was founded by never Trumpers, and yet it's become a voice for I would say progressive voices and democratic voices, and people who care about our democracy. And it's all over the country now. And many times we've had on as guests here the reporters at Courier Newsroom who figured out how to get information, through social media to folks who don't get their news in traditional ways. So we are figuring out how to get people news all over the country, and the country is listening. I mean, and if you just take politics out of it for a minute, go to a grocery store today and you will see that it costs like 3 cents for a bag of lettuce because no one is buying it, because everybody knows that an RFK salad is potentially poisonous these days, right? And they didn't find that out listening to Fox. They found it out because they found it out. We are able to get news, and that news isn't just about lettuce. People are learning about the politics and turning on these terrible people. Thank God. Anyway, that's got to be it for today. I will talk to you all next week. Stay strong, stay involved. Think about that. We can win back Ohio. We can win in Mississippi. There are amazing things happening across this country, and where you can, make a plan to help. Thanks so much.